Noah Ramsey stood frozen in the marble foyer of the most expensive mansion he'd ever entered. His heart stopped beating. There, hanging above the grand fireplace, was his dead wife's face staring back at him. But the gold plaque beneath read a name he'd never heard: Lydia Ward, beloved sister. His wife Grace had been dead for 3 years. So why was her portrait hanging in a billionaire's home with another woman's name? Stay with me until the end, and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The morning of March 15th began like every other morning in Noah Ramsey's life, with exhaustion, coffee that had gone cold, and a 5-year-old boy who refused to eat his breakfast. "Oliver, please," Noah said, rubbing his eyes with the heel of his palm. "Just 3 more bites, that's all I'm asking." Oliver Ramsey, with his mother's dark curls and his father's stubborn jaw, pushed the bowl of oatmeal away from him like it was poisoned. "It's lumpy." "It's supposed to be lumpy. It's oatmeal." "Mommy's oatmeal wasn't lumpy." The words hit Noah like a punch to the chest. 3 years. 3 years since Grace had died, and still these small moments could bring him to his knees. He gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, steadying himself, forcing the grief back down into the dark place where he kept it locked away during daylight hours. "You're right," Noah said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mommy made everything better." Oliver looked up at his father with those big brown eyes, Grace's eyes, and for a moment Noah saw her so clearly it physically hurt. The boy seemed to sense he'd said something that wounded his father. His small hand reached across the table. "I'm sorry, Daddy." Noah forced a smile. "Nothing to be sorry for, buddy. Tell you what, eat 2 more bites, and I'll put extra chocolate chips in your lunchbox." Oliver considered this negotiation with the seriousness of a Wall Street broker evaluating a merger. 3 chocolate chips? 5. Deal. Noah watched his son eat, memorizing the way his nose scrunched up with each bite, the way his feet swung beneath the chair because they couldn't reach the floor yet. These moments, these ordinary, exhausting, beautiful moments, were all Noah had left. He clung to them like a drowning man clings to driftwood. His phone buzzed on the counter. A text from his boss at Henderson's Floral Deliveries. Special delivery. 847 Ocean View Drive. VIP client. Don't screw this up. Noah sighed. Ocean View Drive. That was the wealthy part of town, the part where houses had names instead of numbers, where driveways were longer than his entire street, where people ordered flower arrangements that cost more than his monthly rent. "Looks like Daddy's got a big delivery today," Noah said, clearing Oliver's bowl. "Mrs. Patterson is going to pick you up in 20 minutes for school, okay? Can I come with you?" "Not today, buddy. This is a fancy house. They probably don't allow kids." "That's dumb," Oliver declared with the absolute certainty only a 5-year-old could muster. "Kids make everything better." Noah laughed, a real laugh, the kind that had become rare in the 3 years since Grace's death. "You know what? You're absolutely right, but rules are rules. Now go brush your teeth, and actually use toothpaste this time." Oliver scampered off, and Noah allowed himself one moment of stillness. He looked at the photograph on the refrigerator, the only photo of Grace he kept in plain sight. In it, she was laughing at something off camera, her dark hair caught by the wind, her eyes crinkled with joy. She'd been pregnant with Oliver when that photo was taken. She'd had no idea she only had 2 years left to live. "Miss you," Noah whispered to the photograph. "Every single day." Then he grabbed his keys and headed out the door. Bonk. The house on Ocean View Drive. Noah had seen wealthy homes before. In his 3 years working for Henderson's Floral Deliveries, he'd delivered arrangements to doctors, lawyers, local politicians, and the occasional minor celebrity who'd retired to their coastal town. He'd walk through marble foyers and past swimming pools and into kitchens larger than his entire apartment. But he had never, not once, seen anything like 847 Ocean View Drive. The house wasn't a house, it was an estate. It was a monument. It was the kind of place that belonged in magazines or movies, not in real life. The driveway alone took nearly 2 minutes to navigate, winding through manicured gardens and past a fountain that featured actual bronze statues of horses mid-gallop. "Jesus Christ," Noah muttered, gripping the steering wheel of his battered delivery van. Who lives here? A king? The main house, if you could call it that, rose 3 stories into the crisp morning air, all white stone and floor-to-ceiling windows, and architectural details that Noah couldn't name but knew cost more than he'd earn in 10 lifetimes. A fleet of luxury cars was parked in a circular drive out front, a Bentley, 2 Mercedes, something Italian and red that probably cost more than Noah's apartment building. He parked his van, which suddenly looked comically out of place like a stray dog at a purebred show, and carefully retrieved the delivery from the back. It was a massive arrangement of white roses and lilies, elegant and expensive. The card attached read simply, "In loving memory, always Victoria." Noah carried the arrangement up the front steps, which were flanked by stone lions that seemed to judge him for his worn jeans and faded jacket. He rang the doorbell and waited, and waited, and waited. He was about to ring again when the door swung open, revealing a woman in her 60s wearing a crisp uniform that marked her as household staff. "Delivery for the Ward residents," Noah said, offering his most professional smile. "Henderson's Florals." The woman's eyes flicked over him, assessing, categorizing, dismissing, before she stepped aside. "The main hall. Follow me." Noah followed her through a door that probably cost more than his van and into a foyer that literally took his breath away. The ceiling soared 20 feet above his head, adorned with a crystal chandelier that scattered rainbow light across white marble floors. A sweeping staircase curved upward like something from a fairy tale. Paintings lined the walls, real paintings, originals, not the prints that hung in Noah's apartment. "You may place the arrangement on the table there," the woman said, gesturing to a side table near the entrance. "I'll ensure the family receives it." "Thank you," Noah said. "I just need a signature for—" He stopped mid-sentence. He stopped breathing. He stopped existing as anything other than a man confronted with the impossible. Because there, hanging above the grand fireplace at the far end of the foyer, was a portrait. A massive portrait, easily 6 feet tall, in an ornate gold frame. And in that portrait was his wife. Noah's legs moved without his permission, carrying him across the marble floor toward the painting. His heart hammered so hard he could hear it in his ears, could feel it in his throat, could sense it trying to break through his ribs. It was Grace. It was absolutely, undeniably, impossibly Grace. The same dark hair cascading over her shoulders, the same high cheekbones, the same gentle curve of her lips, that almost smile she wore when she was keeping a secret, the same eyes. God, those eyes. The eyes Oliver had inherited, the eyes Noah had fallen in love with all those years ago. But the woman in the portrait was wearing a dress Noah had never seen, a deep blue gown that looked like it cost more than everything Grace had ever owned combined. And her expression was different somehow, harder, older, like someone who'd seen things Grace had never spoken of. And beneath the portrait, engraved on a gold plaque, were words that made Noah's entire world tilt sideways. Lydia Ward, beloved sister. "Sir, sir, you can't be over here, sir!" The housekeeper's voice came from very far away, muffled by the roaring in Noah's ears. "That's—" Noah's voice cracked. He cleared his throat, tried again. "That's my wife." "Excuse me?" "That's my wife." He pointed at the portrait with a trembling hand. "That's Grace, my wife. She died 3 years ago. Why is her portrait in this house? Why does it say Lydia Ward? Who is Lydia Ward?" The housekeeper's face went pale. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Sir, I think you need to leave." "I'm not leaving until someone explains to me why my dead wife's picture is hanging in your mansion." Noah didn't realize he was shouting until his own voice echoed back at him from the high ceilings. He didn't realize he'd grabbed the housekeeper's arm until she gasped and tried to pull away. He didn't realize he was crying until he tasted salt on his lips. "What is going on here?" The voice came from the top of the staircase, cold, commanding, the voice of someone who had never been questioned in her life and didn't intend to start now. Noah looked up. And there, descending the curved staircase like a queen approaching her throne, was the most striking woman Noah had ever seen. She was perhaps 40, with silver blonde hair pulled back in an elegant twist. Her face was beautiful in the way that expensive things are beautiful, perfect, polished, untouchable. She wore a simple black dress that probably cost more than Noah's car, and diamonds glittered at her ears and throat. But it was her eyes that caught Noah's attention, her eyes that made him take an involuntary step backward, because those eyes were looking at him like he was an insect that had crawled into her home, and she was deciding whether to crush him or simply have him removed. "Mrs. Ward," the housekeeper said, her voice shaking, "this delivery man is causing a disturbance. He's making wild claims about the portrait. I heard." The woman, Mrs. Ward, reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped, her gaze moving from Noah to the portrait and back again. Something flickered in her expression, something that might have been recognition, or fear, or both. "Leave us, Margaret." "But Mrs. Ward—" "Now." The housekeeper practically fled. Celeste Ward walked toward Noah with measured steps, her heels clicking against the marble like a countdown. She stopped 10 feet away, her arms crossed over her chest, her chin lifted high. "You have 30 seconds to explain yourself before I call security." "That portrait," Noah said, his voice steadier now but still rough with emotion. "That woman. Her name isn't Lydia Ward. Her name is Grace. Grace Ramsey. She was my wife, and she's been dead for 3 years." Celeste's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes did. Something cracked behind that perfect facade. "That's impossible." "Look at me. Do I look like I'm lying? Do I look like someone who would walk into a stranger's home and make up a story about his dead wife?" Celeste studied him for a long moment. Her jaw tightened. "That portrait," she said finally, each word carefully controlled, "is of my sister, Lydia Elizabeth Ward. She disappeared 13 years ago. We never found her. We never knew what happened to her. Our mother commissioned that portrait from photographs because she refused to accept that Lydia was gone." A pause. "She passed away 2 years ago, my mother, still waiting for a daughter who never came home." Noah shook his head. "No, that's not possible. I met Grace 8 years ago. We were married for 5 years before she died. She never mentioned a family. She never mentioned being from wealth. She never mentioned the name Lydia or Ward or any of this." "Then one of us is lying." "I'm not lying." "Neither am I." They stared at each other, two strangers whose lives had just collided in a way neither could understand. The portrait of Grace, of Lydia, looked down at them both, her painted eyes keeping secrets even in death. "I have a son," Noah said quietly. "Oliver. He's 5 years old. He has her eyes. He has her smile. He exists. My marriage existed. My wife existed. I don't know who Lydia Ward was, but Grace Ramsey was real." Celeste's composure finally cracked, just a little, just enough to show the human being beneath the ice. "What did she look like?" Celeste's voice was barely above a whisper. "Your wife. Tell me what she looked like. Dark hair, brown eyes, dark brown, almost black. A small scar on her left temple from a childhood accident she never explained. She bit her lip when she was nervous. She laughed at her own jokes before she finished telling them. She sang off key and didn't care who heard her." With each detail, Celeste's face grew paler. Her hands, which had been perfectly still at her sides, began to tremble. "The scar," she said. "The scar on her left temple. She got it when she was 7. We were playing in the garden, and she fell against the stone wall. There was so much blood. I thought she was going to die. She screamed, and I held her hand until the doctors came." Noah felt the ground shift beneath his feet. "That's not possible," he heard himself say. "Grace never mentioned a sister. She never mentioned any family at all. She said she was an orphan. She said she had no one." She lied. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither was ready to face. "No," Noah said. "Grace wouldn't lie to me. Not about something like that. Not for 8 years." "You don't know what she would or wouldn't do," Celeste shot back. And now there was anger in her voice, real anger, the kind that comes from wounds that have never healed. "You knew her for 8 years. I knew her for 20, and I'm telling you that woman in that portrait is my sister, my baby sister, who I raised after our father died and our mother fell apart. My baby sister, who disappeared in the middle of the night without a word, without a note, without a single goddamn explanation. Why would she do that? Why would she run? Celeste laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that echoed off the marble walls. You really don't know anything, do you? You married a woman, had a child with her, and you don't know the first thing about who she really was. Then tell me. Why should I? You're a stranger, a delivery man who walked into my home and started making accusations. I'm the father of your nephew. Celeste went still, completely, utterly still, like a statue carved from ice. If that portrait is your sister, Noah continued, pressing his advantage, and if your sister was my wife, then Oliver, my son, is your family, your blood, the only piece of Lydia that still exists in this world. You can't know that. There's one way to find out. Celeste stared at him for a long moment. Her eyes searched his face, looking for something. Deception, maybe, or madness, or some sign that this was an elaborate con. Whatever she was looking for, she apparently didn't find it. A DNA test, she said finally. I'll arrange for a DNA test tomorrow. If the results show what you're claiming, then we'll talk. Until then, I want you out of my house. Fine. Noah pulled a business card from his pocket, a cheap thing, printed at a copy shop, Henderson's Floral Deliveries and his cell phone number. But I'm not disappearing. Not until I understand what happened. Not until I understand who my wife really was. Celeste took the card like it might bite her. She looked at it for a long moment, then looked up at Noah. Mr. Ramsey, she said, her voice cold again, controlled, queenly. I hope for both our sakes that you're either mistaken or lying, because if you're not, if my sister really married you and lived as someone named Grace for nearly a decade, then there are things about my family that you don't want to know, things that might explain why she ran, things that might make you wish you'd never walked through my door. I'm not afraid of the truth. You should be. Celeste turned and walked toward the staircase. At the base, she paused without looking back. Margaret will show you out. I'll be in touch about the test. And then she was gone, ascending the staircase with perfect posture, disappearing into the upper reaches of her mansion like a ghost returning to its haunt. Noah stood alone in the marble foyer, staring up at the portrait of his dead wife who was apparently someone else entirely. Someone named Lydia Ward. Someone with a family. Someone with secrets. Grace, he whispered to the portrait, to the memory, to whatever part of her might still be listening. What did you do? What were you running from? And why didn't you tell me? The portrait didn't answer. It never would. The long drive home. Noah didn't remember leaving the Ward estate. He didn't remember getting into his van. He didn't remember driving through the iron gates or winding down the long driveway or turning onto the main road. He came back to himself somewhere on Highway 7, pulled over on the shoulder, his hands shaking so badly he couldn't grip the steering wheel. Okay, he said out loud, because hearing his own voice made everything feel slightly more real. Okay, think. Think about this logically. But there was nothing logical about any of it. His wife had been someone else. His wife had run away from a billionaire family. His wife had lied to him for 8 years, about her name, about her past, about everything that made her who she was. Except, had she? Noah thought about Grace, really thought about her, the way he hadn't let himself think about her since the funeral, the way she'd smile at him across a room, the way she'd hold Oliver so carefully, like he was made of glass and gold, the way she'd whisper "I love you" every night before they fell asleep, like she was afraid she'd never get another chance to say it. That woman, that love, had been real. He would stake his life on it. But so were the lies. How could both things be true? His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Patterson, Oliver's babysitter, and the only person Noah trusted to pick his son up from school. Oliver wants to know if you'll be home for dinner. He says you promised macaroni. Noah stared at the text until his vision blurred. Oliver. His son. His and Grace's son. No. His and Lydia's son. God, how was he supposed to explain any of this? Tell him yes, Noah typed back. Mac and cheese, with extra cheese. And tell him Daddy loves him. He put the phone down and sat in silence for a long time, watching cars pass on the highway, watching the sun move across the sky, watching the world continue to turn like it wasn't ending. Then he started the van and drove home. Oh, dinner with Oliver. Daddy, you're putting in too much milk. Noah looked down at the pot of mac and cheese and realized his son was right. He'd been staring into space, thinking about portraits and DNA tests and billionaires, and now there was twice as much milk in the pot as there should be. Good catch, buddy, Noah said, forcing a smile. You're going to make a great chef someday. I want to be an astronaut. Astronauts need to eat too. Oliver considered this with utmost seriousness. Can I be a chef on a spaceship? You can be anything you want. Oliver nodded, satisfied, and went back to coloring at the kitchen table. He was drawing a picture of a house, a big house with lots of windows and a garden, and what appeared to be either a dog or a very small horse. That's a nice house, Noah said, stirring the pasta. Who lives there? Me and you and Mommy. Noah's hand stopped mid-stir. Mommy lives in heaven, Oliver continued, matter-of-factly, the way children talk about things they've been told but don't quite understand. But in my picture, she lives with us. Because in pictures, anything can happen. Noah had to turn away, had to face the stove and blink rapidly until his eyes stopped burning. You're right, he said when he could trust his voice. In pictures, anything can happen. They ate dinner together at the small kitchen table, mac and cheese with extra cheese, just as promised. Oliver talked about school, about his friend Marcus, who could burp the alphabet, about a caterpillar they'd found on the playground that their teacher said would turn into a butterfly. Daddy, do butterflies remember being caterpillars? I don't know, buddy. That's a good question. I think they do. I think they remember crawling and being small, and then they remember having wings, like a superpower. Maybe. When I grow up, I want to remember everything, even the sad stuff. Because the sad stuff is still part of the story, right? Noah looked at his son, this small, wise, impossible person who was half him and half Grace, and apparently also half someone named Lydia Ward. Yeah, Noah said softly. The sad stuff is still part of the story. After dinner, they watched a movie together, some animated thing about talking animals that Noah couldn't follow because his mind kept wandering to the portrait, to Celeste Ward's cold eyes, to the 1,000 questions without answers. When the movie ended, Noah carried Oliver to bed, tucked him in, turned on the dinosaur nightlight. Daddy? Yeah, buddy? Are you sad tonight? Noah knelt beside the bed, brushing Oliver's dark curls away from his forehead. What makes you ask that? You have your sad eyes. You get sad eyes when you think about Mommy. This kid, this perceptive, gentle, heartbreaking kid. I'm thinking about Mommy tonight, Noah admitted. But it's okay. Sometimes being sad about someone means you love them very much, and I loved your Mommy more than anything in the world. Except me. Noah smiled, a real smile this time. Except you. I love you even more. Good. Oliver yawned, his eyes already drifting closed. Daddy? Yeah? I think Mommy can still see us from heaven. I think she watches us and makes sure we're okay. Noah's throat tightened. I think so too. Good night, Daddy. Good night, Oliver. He kissed his son's forehead and left the room, pulling the door almost closed behind him. Then he walked to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of whiskey with hands that still shook slightly, and sat down at the table where Grace used to sit. Her picture was on the refrigerator. Her picture was also in a billionaire's mansion. 2 lives, 2 names, 2 worlds that had never been meant to collide. Who were you, Grace? Noah whispered to the empty kitchen. Who were you really? The DNA test. 3 days later, Noah found himself in a sterile medical office watching a nurse swab the inside of Oliver's cheek while Oliver complained that it tickled. Just a few more seconds, the nurse said. You're being so brave. I'm always brave, Oliver declared. I'm the bravest person in my whole class, even braver than Marcus, and Marcus isn't scared of spiders. The nurse smiled, capped the swab, and noted something on her tablet. All done. The results should be ready in about a week. A week. 7 days of waiting, 7 days of not knowing. Celeste Ward had arranged everything with frightening efficiency. A private lab, expedited processing, legal documentation ensuring that the results would be admissible in court if necessary. The woman might be cold, but she was thorough. Noah hadn't seen her since that day at the mansion. She'd communicated through assistants, a phone call here, an email there, all businesslike and impersonal. He didn't know if that was better or worse than facing her again. "Daddy, why did that lady need my spit?" Oliver asked as they walked to the car. "It's not spit exactly. It's DNA. Little tiny pieces inside your body that show who you're related to." "Am I related to you?" "Yes, absolutely." "And Mommy?" Noah opened the car door, helped Oliver into his booster seat. "Yes, and Mommy. Who else?" The question hit Noah like a physical blow. Who else? Such an innocent question, such a devastating answer. "We're going to find out," Noah said. "That's what the test is for." Oliver accepted this with the easy trust of childhood. He started talking about something else, something about school and art projects and a boy named Tyler who ate paste. And Noah drove home in a daze, half listening, half drowning in his own thoughts. The week of waiting. The week passed in slow motion. Noah went to work, made deliveries, smiled at customers, pretended to be normal while his entire life hung in the balance. At night, after Oliver went to bed, Noah would sit at the kitchen table with a box of Grace's things, the only box filled with the few possessions she'd left behind. There wasn't much. Grace had never been one for accumulating things. A few pieces of jewelry, some books, dog-eared and well-loved, a journal with a lock that Noah had never been able to open, a photo album from their wedding, which Noah couldn't bring himself to look at. And at the bottom of the box, buried beneath everything else, a small envelope labeled, "For Noah, after." After. After what? Her death? Had she known she was going to die? Noah had found the envelope when he was packing up their apartment after the funeral, and he'd shoved it in the box without opening it. At the time, he'd told himself he wasn't ready, that he needed more time, that the wound was too fresh. But now, sitting in the dim light of the kitchen, knowing what he knew about portraits and billionaires and sisters who disappeared, he picked up the envelope. His hands trembled. "What secrets did you leave behind, Grace?" he whispered. But he couldn't do it. Couldn't break the seal, couldn't face whatever was inside. Not yet. He put the envelope back in the box, closed the lid, and poured himself another whiskey. The phone call. 7 days after the DNA test, Noah's phone rang at 6:47 in the morning. He was making breakfast for Oliver, scrambled eggs this time, because Noah had finally figured out how to make them without burning them, when the phone buzzed against the counter. Unknown number. He answered anyway. "Mr. Ramsey?" Celeste Ward's voice was crisp, controlled, giving nothing away. "The results are in." Noah turned off the stove, walked into the living room, sat down on the couch because his legs suddenly couldn't support him. "And?" A pause. A long, terrible pause. 99.9% match, Celeste said. "Your son Oliver is my biological nephew, which means your wife Grace was my sister Lydia." The world tilted, steadied, tilted again. "Mr. Ramsey, are you there?" "I'm here." His voice sounded strange to his own ears, hollow, distant. "What happens now?" "Now we talk. Face to face. Without lawyers or tests or strangers listening. Just you and me." "When?" "Tonight, 8 o'clock. There's a restaurant called Marchetti's downtown, neutral ground, private booths in the back. I'll make a reservation. I have to find a babysitter. I'll wait." Noah laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "You'll wait? You've been waiting 13 years for your sister to come home, and now you'll wait a few extra hours for a babysitter? Don't," Celeste said, and for the first time her voice cracked, just slightly, just enough to reveal the wound beneath the ice. "Don't make this harder than it already is." "I'm sorry." And surprisingly, Noah meant it. "I'll be there. 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock. The line went dead. Noah sat on the couch for a long time, staring at his phone, trying to process what he'd just learned. It was real. It was all real. Grace was Lydia. Oliver was a ward, and somewhere in the past 13 years, a woman had run away from everything she knew, built a new life, fallen in love, had a child, and died without ever telling anyone the truth. "Daddy?" Oliver appeared in the doorway, still in his pajamas, his hair sticking up in 17 different directions. "Is the eggs ready?" Noah looked at his son, at Lydia's son, and felt something shift in his chest. Not the grief he'd carried for 3 years, something new, something complicated, something that felt almost like hope. "The eggs are ready," Noah said, standing up and forcing a smile. "Come on, let's eat." Marchetti's, the restaurant was old-school Italian. Red checkered tablecloths, candles in wine bottles, photos of Sicily on the walls. It smelled like garlic and fresh bread and something sweet baking in the back. Celeste was already there when Noah arrived, seated in a corner booth with her back to the wall. She'd traded her designer dress for something simpler, still expensive, still elegant, but somehow more human. A glass of red wine sat untouched in front of her. "Mr. Ramsey?" She gestured to the seat across from her. "Thank you for coming." "Noah." He slid into the booth. "If we're going to talk about my dead wife and your missing sister, I think we're past Mr. Ramsey." The corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Fair enough. Noah." "Celeste." They looked at each other across the table. Two people who should have nothing in common, bound together by a ghost. "I ordered wine," Celeste said. "I didn't know if you drink." "After the week I've had, definitely." She poured him a glass. They both drank. The silence stretched. "I don't know where to start," Celeste finally admitted. "I've thought about this conversation for 13 years. What I would say to Lydia if I ever found her, what questions I would ask, what answers I would demand. But I never imagined I'd be having it with her husband instead." "Tell me about her." Noah leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "Tell me about Lydia. Tell me who she was before she became Grace." Celeste took a long sip of wine, set the glass down carefully. "She was sunshine," Celeste said softly. "That's the only way I can describe her. My father died when I was 15 and she was 10. Our mother, she didn't handle it well. She retreated into her work, into the family business, into the money and the status and the endless social obligations. She stopped being a mother and became a manager. What about you?" "I became a mother instead. I raised Lydia, helped her with homework, taught her to drive, listened to her talk about boys and dreams and all the things she wanted to do with her life." Celeste's voice caught. "I loved her more than I've ever loved anyone. And one night, when she was 22 years old, she disappeared without a trace." "What happened?" Celeste hesitated, her fingers tightened around the wine glass. "Our mother," she said finally. "Our mother happened. Victoria Ward was, a force of nature, a hurricane in human form. She built the Ward empire from nothing, and she expected her daughters to be extensions of herself. She had plans for us, plans for our careers, our marriages, our entire lives. Every choice was made for us, every decision controlled. And Lydia didn't want to be controlled. Lydia wanted to be free. She wanted to travel, to paint, to fall in love with someone she chose, not someone our mother selected from a list of approved suitors. She wanted to be a person, not a possession." Celeste's voice hardened. "But our mother wouldn't allow it. There were arguments, threats, ultimatums, and then one night, Lydia was just gone. No note? No goodbye? Nothing. I woke up, and her room was empty. Her clothes were gone, her money was gone, her phone was left behind. The police investigated, but there was no sign of foul play. She'd left voluntarily. She'd chosen to disappear." Noah thought about Grace, about her complete lack of history, her reluctance to talk about her past, the way she'd flinch whenever someone asked about her family. "She was hiding from you. She was hiding from our mother." Celeste's jaw tightened. "Our mother hired private investigators. For years, spent millions trying to find her. But Lydia had done something smart. She'd taken a small amount of cash, nothing that would trigger alerts, and she'd completely reinvented herself. New name, new history, new life. She was a ghost. Until she became Grace Ramsey. Until she met you." Celeste looked at him with something like curiosity. How did you meet her? Lydia? Grace? Noah smiled despite himself. The memory was a good one, untainted by the revelations of the past week. A coffee shop, he said. Downtown. I was trying to write. I had these stupid dreams of being a novelist back then, and she was sitting at the next table, reading a book. She laughed at something she read, and I looked up and she caught me staring. He shook his head. I should have been embarrassed, but I wasn't. I just walked over and asked what was so funny. What did she say? She said, life. Life is funny, don't you think? And then she smiled at me, and I was completely gone. I knew in that moment that I was going to marry her. Celeste's eyes glistened. That sounds like her. Like the Lydia I remember. She told me she was an orphan, that she'd grown up in foster care, bounced around between homes, never belonged anywhere. She said that's why she didn't talk about her past, because there was nothing worth talking about. And you believed her. I loved her. Noah's voice was raw. I would have believed anything she told me. That's what love does. They sat in silence for a moment, two people grieving the same person, trying to bridge the gap between the Lydia who ran away and the Grace who died. I found something, Noah said finally, after she died. An envelope, addressed to me. I never opened it. Celeste's head snapped up. You have a letter from her? Maybe. I don't know what it is. I wasn't ready to look. He pulled the envelope from his jacket pocket. He'd been carrying it for days, unable to leave it behind. I thought maybe we should open it together. Celeste stared at the envelope like it might explode. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. Are you sure? No? Noah handed it to her. But I think it's time. Celeste turned the envelope over in her hands, studying Grace's handwriting, her sister's handwriting, a name she hadn't seen in 13 years. Together? She asked. Together. Celeste broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in Grace's flowing script. Celeste unfolded it carefully, holding it so they could both read. My darling Noah, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry for leaving you. I'm sorry for the lies, and I'm sorry for the truth I could never tell you while I was alive. My name wasn't Grace. It was Lydia Ward. I came from a world of wealth and privilege, but it was a cage made of gold, and I was dying inside it. So I ran. And I never looked back, and I became someone new, someone who could choose her own life, her own love, her own happiness. I chose you, Noah. I chose you every single day for 8 years, and I have never regretted it for a moment. You gave me the life I always dreamed of. You gave me Oliver. You gave me a reason to believe that good things could happen to broken people. But I was never honest with you, and that is my greatest shame. I was afraid that if you knew the truth, if you knew who I was, who my family was, you would look at me differently. Or worse, they would find me. They would find us. And I couldn't let that happen. My mother is a dangerous woman, Noah. She doesn't love. She possesses. She doesn't forgive. She destroys. I ran to protect myself, but I stayed hidden to protect you and Oliver. Some secrets are better left buried. If you're reading this, it means I never got the chance to tell you myself. I always planned to, someday. When Oliver was older, when it felt safer, when I found the courage. But someday never came, and now it's too late. Please don't hate me for lying, hate me for dying, hate me for leaving you alone with a 5-year-old who needs his mother, hate me for being too sick, too weak, too mortal. But don't hate me for protecting the only people I ever loved. And if you ever find my sister Celeste, please tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I never stopped loving her. Tell her I ran because I had to, not because I wanted to. She was more of a mother to me than our real mother ever was, and losing her was the hardest part of disappearing. I love you, Noah. I love Oliver. I love the life we built together. I love you. I love you. I love you. Always, Grace. Lydia. When Noah finished reading, his face was wet with tears. When he looked up, he saw that Celeste was crying too, silently, her shoulders shaking, her perfect composure finally shattered. She never stopped loving you, Noah said, his voice barely above a whisper. She never stopped loving you either, Celeste replied. And there, in a corner booth at Marchetti's, surrounded by the smell of garlic and the sound of distant Italian music, two strangers became something more. Not friends. Not yet. But not strangers anymore either. The beginning of understanding. They talked for hours that night. Through dinner they didn't taste, through dessert they didn't eat. Through bottle after bottle of wine that neither of them should have drunk. Celeste told Noah about Lydia's childhood, about the horse she'd loved and lost, about the art classes she'd begged for, about the way she used to climb the old oak tree in the garden and pretend she could see the whole world from its branches. Noah told Celeste about Grace, about her terrible singing, about her competitive streak at board games, about the way she'd cry at commercials with dogs in them, but stay stoic through the saddest movies. They laughed. They cried. They filled in the gaps of a woman's life, building a complete picture from their broken pieces. "What happens now?" Noah asked as the restaurant began to close around them. Celeste considered the question. Her face was softer now. The ice melted, the walls lowered. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've spent 13 years hating my sister for leaving, and now I find out she didn't leave because she didn't love me. She left because she loved me too much to drag me into her escape. She was protecting you. She was protecting everyone except herself." Celeste's voice cracked. She was always like that, putting everyone else first, carrying burdens that weren't hers to carry. "That's the Grace I knew," Noah said. "She would give you the shirt off her back and apologize that it wasn't warmer." Celeste laughed, a real laugh, full and genuine. "That's Lydia. God, that's exactly Lydia." She reached across the table and took Noah's hand. It was an impulsive gesture, surprising them both. "I want to know Oliver," she said. "I want to be part of his life. Part of your life, if you'll allow it. Not because of money or obligation or family duty, because he's all I have left of her. Because you're all I have left of her." Noah looked at their joined hands. Her fingers were cold and delicate against his calloused palm. "Oliver needs family," he said slowly. "Real family, not just me. And I think Grace would have wanted this. I think that's why she wrote the letter." "You think she planned for us to meet?" "I think she hoped we would. Someday. When it was safe." Celeste's grip tightened on his hand. "Then let's honor that hope," she said. "Let's build something. For Oliver, for Grace, for Lydia. For whoever she was and whoever she wanted to be." Noah nodded. And in that moment, sitting in a closing restaurant with a woman who had been a stranger just days ago, he felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Not happiness. Not yet. But the possibility of it. The first tentative spark of something new. The days that followed that night at Marchetti's felt different somehow, as though the world had shifted on its axis and Noah was still trying to find his footing on new ground. He woke each morning with Grace's letter on his nightstand, her words echoing in his mind like a song he couldn't stop humming. She had loved him. She had lied to him. Both things were true, and Noah was slowly learning to hold them together without breaking apart. Celeste called 3 days after their dinner, her voice slightly less guarded than it had been before. "I was thinking," she said without preamble, "that perhaps I could meet Oliver. Properly, I mean. Not in a medical office with nurses and DNA swabs." Noah had been expecting this call, dreading it, and hoping for it in equal measure. "He doesn't know anything yet," he said carefully. "About Grace, about Lydia, about any of it. He's 5 years old. I don't know how to explain that his mother was someone else entirely." "You don't have to explain everything at once." Celeste's tone softened, losing some of its businesslike edge. "Children are more resilient than we give them credit for, and more perceptive. He'll sense if you're keeping secrets." "He already does," Noah sighed, running a hand through his hair. "He asked me last night why I keep looking at Mommy's picture differently. I didn't even realize I was doing it." "What did you tell him?" "That I was just missing her extra much, which is true in a way." There was a pause on the line, and Noah could almost hear Celeste choosing her next words with care. "I'm not suggesting we overwhelm him with information, but perhaps we could start small. I could be, a friend. Someone who knew his mother a long time ago. We could build from there." Noah thought about Oliver, about his dark curls and his mother's eyes and the way he talked to Grace's photograph when he thought no one was listening. The boy deserved to know where he came from. He deserved family beyond just his father and a fading memory. "Saturday," Noah said finally. "There's a park near our apartment. Oliver loves the swings. Meet us there at 2 o'clock and we'll see how it goes." "Saturday at 2, Celeste repeated. "I'll be there." She hung up before Noah could say anything else, and he stood in his kitchen holding the phone, wondering if he was making the right choice or walking them all into disaster. The next few days passed in a blur of work and worry. Noah delivered flowers to weddings and funerals and hospital rooms, smiling at strangers while his mind churned with questions he couldn't answer. At night he would sit with Grace's journal, the one with the lock he'd never been able to open, turning it over in his hands like a puzzle box, wondering what secrets were hidden inside. He'd tried to open it once, years ago, in the dark days after Grace's funeral. He'd looked for keys, tried bobby pins, even considered breaking the lock entirely. But something had stopped him. Grace had wanted those words private. She'd chosen to lock them away. Who was he to violate that choice, even in death? But now everything was different. Now he knew that the woman he'd married had been living a double life, carrying burdens he'd never suspected. Now he needed to understand. On Friday night, after Oliver was asleep, Noah sat at the kitchen table with the journal in front of him and a small hammer in his hand. His heart pounded as he stared at the delicate brass lock, such a fragile thing standing between him and the truth. "Forgive me," he whispered to the empty room, to Grace, to whoever might be listening. Then he brought the hammer down. The lock shattered with a sound that seemed far too loud in the quiet apartment. Noah froze, listening for any sign that Oliver had woken, but the only sound was his own ragged breathing. He opened the journal with trembling hands. The first entry was dated 7 years before Grace's death, written in her familiar flowing script. Noah recognized the date immediately. It was 3 weeks after they'd met at the coffee shop, 2 weeks after their first real date, 1 week after he'd told her he thought he might be falling in love with her. "I've done something terrible," the entry began. "I've fallen in love with a man who doesn't know my name, my real name. He calls me Grace, and every time I hear it, I feel like I'm being reborn. Like the person I was before, Lydia Ward, daughter of Victoria, prisoner of expectation, is finally truly dead. Is it wrong to be grateful for that? Is it wrong to mourn and celebrate at the same time? Noah looks at me like I'm something precious, something worth protecting. No one has ever looked at me that way before. My mother looked at me like an investment. The men she chose for me looked at me like a prize. But Noah looks at me like I'm a person, just a person, flawed and broken and worthy of love anyway. I should tell him the truth. I know I should, but the truth is a door that only opens one way. Once I walk through it, I can never go back. And I'm not ready to lose this. Not yet. Maybe not ever." Noah turned the page, his eyes blurring with tears. "Mother's investigators came close today. I saw one of them in the grocery store. A man I recognized from the security team at the estate. He didn't see me. I'd cut my hair, changed the color, lost weight from months of barely eating. I slipped out the back entrance and didn't stop running until I reached Noah's apartment. He found me on his doorstep, shaking and crying, and he didn't ask questions. He just held me. He made me tea and wrapped me in a blanket and told me that whatever was wrong, we would face it together. He doesn't know what together would mean. He doesn't know that being with me puts him in danger. My mother is not a woman who loses gracefully. She doesn't forgive. She doesn't forget. And she absolutely does not let go of what she considers hers. I should leave. I should disappear again, find a new city, a new name, a new life. It's the only way to keep him safe. But I can't. God help me. I can't. I love him too much to walk away." The entries continued, spanning years. Noah read about Grace's constant fear of discovery, her elaborate precautions, her sleepless nights spent watching the door for threats that never came. He read about their wedding day and how she'd cried not from happiness but from guilt, knowing she was binding him to a lie. He read about the day she found out she was pregnant and how she'd spent hours staring at the pregnancy test, terrified that bringing a child into her web of deception was the cruelest thing she'd ever done. "Oliver moved today," one entry read. I was lying on the couch, feeling him kick and flutter inside me, and I started crying. Not sad tears, hopeful ones. This baby is a miracle. This baby is proof that good things can grow even in the darkest soil. This baby is half me and half Noah, and that means he's half Ward and half Ramsey, half lie and half truth. I'm going to be a better mother than Victoria ever was. I'm going to love this child for who he is, not who I want him to be. I'm going to give him choices and freedom and the space to make mistakes. I'm going to break the cycle, even if it breaks me. But I'm also going to protect him from my mother, from my past, from the name Ward and everything it represents. My son will never know the weight of that legacy. He'll grow up believing he comes from nothing and that nothing will set him free. Noah closed the journal. He couldn't read anymore. Not tonight. His head was pounding, his heart was aching, and the woman he thought he'd known had become a stranger all over again. But a familiar stranger. A stranger who loved him. A stranger who had sacrificed everything to build a life with him, knowing all the while that it might crumble to dust. "Oh, Grace," he whispered into the darkness. "What did they do to you? What made you so afraid?" The journal couldn't answer, but maybe Celeste could. Saturday arrived wrapped in spring sunshine and the nervous energy of new beginnings. Noah dressed Oliver in his favorite dinosaur shirt and tried to explain as simply as possible that they were meeting a friend at the park. "What kind of friend?" Oliver asked, suspicious in the way only children can be. "A new friend. Someone who knew Mommy a long time ago." Oliver's eyes went wide. "Mommy had friends?" The question broke Noah's heart a little. Of course, Grace had friends. She'd been warm and funny, and the kind of person strangers felt comfortable talking to in checkout lines. But she'd kept everyone at arm's length, never letting anyone get too close, never building the deep connections that might lead to questions she couldn't answer. By the time she died, there had been no one at the funeral except Noah, Oliver, and a handful of acquaintances who barely knew her name. "Mommy had lots of friends," Noah said, forcing brightness into his voice. "She just didn't see them very often. This friend is very special. She traveled a long way to meet you." "Does she have candy?" Noah laughed despite himself. "I don't know, maybe. You'll have to ask her." The park was busy when they arrived, filled with families enjoying the warm weather. Children shrieked on the playground equipment while parents watched from benches, coffee cups in hand, phones at the ready. It was so normal, so beautifully ordinary, that Noah felt a pang of something like grief for all the Saturdays Grace had missed. He spotted Celeste immediately. She was standing near the entrance, wearing jeans and a simple blouse instead of her usual designer elegance. Her hair was down, softening the sharp angles of her face. She looked younger somehow, more vulnerable, like a woman trying very hard not to appear intimidating. "Is that her?" Oliver asked, tugging at Noah's hand. "That's her." "She looks nervous." "She is nervous. Meeting new people can be scary, even for grown-ups." Oliver considered this with his usual gravity. "I'll be extra nice to her." "That's my boy." They walked toward Celeste, and Noah watched her face transform as she caught sight of Oliver. Her breath caught visibly, her eyes filled with tears. Her hand came up to cover her mouth, as if she could physically hold back the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "Oh my God," she whispered as they approached. "He looks just like her." Noah felt Oliver's grip tighten on his hand, the boy sensing the intensity of the moment, even if he didn't understand it. "Oliver," Noah said gently, "this is Celeste. She's your aunt." The word had slipped out before Noah could stop it. He'd planned to wait, to ease into the truth gradually, but seeing Celeste's face, seeing the recognition and the love and the desperate hope written there, he couldn't lie. Not about this. Oliver looked up at Noah with confusion. "What's an aunt?" "An aunt is your mommy's sister. Like if you had a sister, you would be Oliver's uncle." "Mommy had a sister?" Oliver's voice was filled with wonder. "How come I never met her?" Celeste knelt down so she was eye level with the boy, and Noah saw her struggle to compose herself. When she spoke, her voice was steady, but only just. "Your mommy and I got separated a long time ago," she said carefully. "Before you were born. I didn't know where she was, and she didn't know how to find me. But I always loved her, and I've always wanted to meet you." Oliver studied her face with the frank curiosity of childhood, looking for something he could trust. Whatever he found must have satisfied him because, after a long moment, he nodded seriously. "Do you have candy?" he asked. Celeste laughed, a surprised, genuine sound that seemed to startle even her. "As a matter of fact, I do." She reached into her purse and produced a small bag of gummy bears. "Your daddy said you liked these." "Daddy!" Oliver turned to Noah with an expression of delighted betrayal. "You told her!" "Guilty as charged." Oliver accepted the candy with appropriate ceremony, examining each gummy bear before consuming it. Celeste watched him with an expression that Noah recognized all too well, the expression of someone falling in love against their better judgment. They spent the afternoon at the park, the three of them. Oliver dragged Celeste to the swings and demanded that she push him higher, higher, as high as the sky. He showed her his trick of hanging upside down on the monkey bars, which terrified Celeste so thoroughly that Noah had to reassure her 3 times that the boy did this every week without incident. He made her examine a caterpillar he found on a leaf, explaining with great authority that it would become a butterfly someday, and that butterflies remembered being caterpillars. "Who told you that?" Celeste asked, charmed despite herself. "I told myself," Oliver said proudly. "I think about things." "He's a philosopher," Noah said, smiling. "Gets it from his mother." Celeste's expression flickered at that, a shadow passing over her face. Lydia was always like that, always thinking, always questioning. She used to drive our mother crazy with her "but why" questions. Grace did the same thing to me. I'd say something completely reasonable like, "Let's have pizza for dinner," and she'd want to know why pizza, why not Thai food, why do we always default to the familiar when there's a whole world of cuisines we haven't explored. "That sounds like her." Celeste's voice was soft with memory. "God, that sounds exactly like her." They sat on a bench while Oliver played in the sandbox nearby, building something that he claimed was a castle but looked more like a lumpy hill. The afternoon sun was warm on their faces, and for a moment everything felt almost peaceful. "I read her journal," Noah said quietly. "Last night. I broke the lock." Celeste turned to look at him, her expression unreadable. "And?" "And she was terrified. Every day she was terrified that your mother would find her, find us. She wrote about surveillance teams and private investigators and watching every stranger on the street like they might be a threat. My mother spent millions looking for her." Celeste's voice was flat, emotionless. "She hired the best investigators money could buy. She called in favors from politicians and law enforcement. She even hired a psychic once, though I suspect that was more desperation than genuine belief. But she never found her. Lydia was smart. She knew how my mother operated, knew the resources she had access to. She stayed off the grid, paid for everything in cash, never kept the same address for more than a few months until—" Celeste paused, looking at Noah with something like wonder. "Until she met you." "She stopped running when she met me?" "She stopped running when she had something worth staying for." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Noah thought about all the times Grace had seemed jumpy or paranoid, all the times she'd changed the subject when he asked about her past, all the times she'd held him a little too tightly, like she was afraid he might disappear. "Your mother," Noah said slowly. "Tell me about her. Tell me what Grace was so afraid of." Celeste was quiet for a long moment, watching Oliver pat sand into shape with his small hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was distant, as if she was reciting a story she'd told herself many times. Victoria Ward was born with nothing. Her family was poor, not struggling poor, but genuinely impoverished. She grew up hungry, wearing clothes that didn't fit, watching other children have things she could only dream of. That kind of childhood leaves marks that never fade. She built the Ward empire herself? From scratch. She married my father for his connections, not his money. He was a middle-class accountant from a respectable family, nothing more. But he had access to people, to opportunities, and Victoria used every single one. She started with a small investment firm, turned it into a real estate company, expanded into technology and manufacturing and media. By the time I was born, we were millionaires. By the time Lydia was born, we were billionaires. Sounds like a success story. It was. On paper. Celeste's jaw tightened. But success made her paranoid. She saw threats everywhere, competitors trying to undermine her, employees trying to steal from her, family members trying to exploit her. She controlled everything with an iron fist. Nothing happened in that house without her approval. Nothing. And when Lydia wanted to be free, freedom wasn't an option, not in Victoria's world. We were extensions of her, tools to be used for the greater glory of the Ward name. I accepted it because I didn't know any different. But Lydia was always a fighter. She pushed back, she questioned, she refused to be molded. What happened? What made her finally run? Celeste closed her eyes, and Noah saw a muscle twitch in her cheek. There was a man, Harrison Cole, heir to the Cole shipping fortune. My mother had arranged for them to marry, a business merger disguised as a romance. Lydia would have been miserable. Harrison was cold and controlling, a younger version of everything my mother represented. But the marriage would have consolidated two empires, created something untouchable. And Lydia refused. She tried. She told my mother she wouldn't do it, that she'd rather die than marry a man she didn't love. My mother's response was, Celeste hesitated as if the words were physically painful to speak. She had Lydia committed. Noah felt his blood turn to ice. What? Psychiatric hold, 72 hours for evaluation. My mother knew people at every hospital in the city, and she convinced them that Lydia was a danger to herself, that her refusal to marry was evidence of mental instability. Celeste's voice cracked. I found out too late. By the time I got to the hospital, they'd already sedated her. She was lying there, so small and pale, and they were talking about long-term treatment plans and medication regimens, and I knew if I didn't do something, my mother would keep her locked away forever. So you helped her escape. Celeste opened her eyes, and they were bright with unshed tears. I bribed an orderly, got her clothes, got her cash, got her out a service entrance at 3 a.m. I told her to run and never look back. I told her that whatever she did, wherever she went, she should never contact me because my mother would be watching. Her voice broke completely. The last thing I said to my baby sister was goodbye. Noah didn't know what to say. He sat in silence, processing the horror of what he'd just heard, trying to reconcile the Grace he'd known, gentle, loving, full of laughter, with the woman who'd survived something so traumatic. She never told me, he finally managed. Not any of it. She was protecting you. She knew that if you knew the truth, you'd want to fight. You'd want to confront my mother, demand justice, expose the whole rotten system, and that would have gotten you killed. Killed? Surely you're exaggerating. I'm not. Celeste's voice was flat and certain. 3 years after Lydia disappeared, there was an investigative journalist who started looking into my mother's business practices. Corruption, bribery, manipulation of regulatory bodies. He died in a car accident before he could publish anything. Single vehicle collision on a clear night on a straight road. You think your mother. I don't think. I know. Celeste turned to face Noah directly, her eyes burning with an intensity that made him want to look away. My mother is not a person who accepts failure. She's not a person who allows threats to exist. If she had found Lydia, she would have brought her back, by force if necessary. And anyone who stood in her way would have been removed. Noah thought about Grace's constant vigilance, her refusal to be photographed, her insistence that they never travel anywhere her face might be captured by security cameras. He thought she was eccentric, maybe a little paranoid. Now he understood she'd been fighting for her life. But your mother died, Noah said. 2 years ago. Grace, Lydia, she was still alive then. She could have come home. She could have contacted you. The words landed like a physical blow. He saw Celeste flinch, saw the pain flash across her face before she could hide it. I've asked myself that question every day since I found out, Celeste said quietly. Why didn't she come back? Why didn't she reach out? Our mother was dead, the threat was gone, and she just stayed hidden. Maybe she didn't know your mother had died. It was in every newspaper, every news broadcast. Victoria Ward dead at 73, leaving behind a business empire and 2 daughters. Celeste laughed bitterly. 2 daughters. Even in death, she couldn't tell the truth. Couldn't admit that one of us had escaped. Then maybe... Noah paused, a terrible thought forming in his mind. Maybe she was already sick by then. Grace... She started getting headaches about 2.5 years before she died. Bad ones. She said it was stress, and I believed her because I wanted to believe her. But what if she knew something was wrong? What if she knew she was dying and she didn't want to reconcile with her family only to lose them all over again? They sat with that possibility in silence. Across the playground, Oliver had finished his sandcastle and was now engaged in an elaborate game with another child, their shrieks of laughter carrying on the wind. "She should have told me," Celeste said, and now her voice was thick with tears. "She should have told both of us. We could have helped her. We could have been there. She was protecting us. That's what she always did. She carried the weight so we didn't have to." "That's not fair." "No," Noah agreed. "It's not." Celeste wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, a gesture so human and unguarded that Noah felt something shift in his chest. She wasn't just a billionaire in designer clothes anymore. She was a woman who had lost her sister twice, once to fear and once to death, and was only now beginning to understand the full scope of that loss. "I want to know her," Celeste said suddenly, turning to face Noah with fierce determination. "The Grace you knew, the person she became after she stopped being Lydia. I want to know everything. Her favorite foods, her terrible jokes, the way she laughed and cried and loved. I want to know the woman my sister turned into when she finally had the chance to be free." Noah thought about Grace, about the 1,000 small moments that had made up their life together, the way she danced in the kitchen while cooking dinner, the way she read to Oliver, giving every character a different voice, the way she would curl up against Noah on cold nights, fitting perfectly into the curve of his body like she'd been designed to go there. "She was happy," Noah said softly. "That's the most important thing. Whatever she went through, whatever demons she was running from, she was genuinely happy. She told me once that every day with us felt like a gift she didn't deserve, and I told her that was ridiculous, and she just smiled and said I didn't understand. She was right. You didn't. I understand now." They looked at each other across the bench, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of shared loss, shared love, shared responsibility for the little boy now running toward them with something clutched in his sandy hands. "Look!" Oliver shouted, skidding to a stop in front of them. "I found a feather. It's from a bird." He held up the feather like a trophy, beaming with pride. It was nothing special, a gray pigeon feather, ragged and slightly dirty, but Oliver looked at it like it was made of gold. "That's beautiful," Celeste said, and her voice trembled only slightly. "What are you going to do with it?" "Keep it forever. Add it to my collection. I have 23 feathers at home, all from different birds. Daddy says when I get 100, we can make something with them." "What would you make?" Oliver considered this with utmost seriousness. "Wings. Big wings for flying, so I can go up to heaven and visit Mommy." The words hit Noah like a punch to the chest. He saw Celeste's face crumple, saw her struggle to maintain composure in front of the child. "That's a wonderful idea," she managed. "Your mommy would love that." "I know," Oliver nodded sagely. "She loves flying. She told me once that when she was little, she used to climb trees and pretend she was a bird, and someday she was going to fly away to somewhere no one could find her." Celeste let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "She told you that?" "Yep, and she said that birds are the luckiest animals because they can go anywhere they want and nobody can stop them." Oliver looked at his feather with new appreciation. "That's why I collect them, because someday I'm going to be free like a bird too." Noah watched Celeste's face as she looked at her nephew, really looked at him, seeing not just a child but the living legacy of her lost sister. He saw the moment something broke inside her, the moment her carefully constructed walls came crashing down. "You are free," she whispered. "You're the freest person I've ever met." Oliver beamed at the compliment, entirely unaware of its weight. "Can we get ice cream now? There's a truck over there and it's playing music, and that means they have the good kind." "Ice cream sounds perfect," Noah said, standing and extending a hand to help Celeste up. "What do you say, Aunt Celeste?" The word hung in the air, aunt, with all its implications of family and belonging and permanence. Celeste took his hand, her fingers cold despite the warm afternoon. "I say yes," she said. "I say yes to everything." They walked to the ice cream truck together, Oliver between them, holding one of each of their hands. To anyone watching, they would have looked like a family, father, mother, child enjoying a weekend outing. But they were something stranger than that, something more complicated. They were three people bound together by a ghost, trying to figure out what came next. Oliver got chocolate with rainbow sprinkles. Noah got plain vanilla because he was boring, according to his son. Celeste got strawberry, which had been Lydia's favorite flavor when they were children. She used to make me trade, Celeste said, watching the pink ice cream melt slowly in the spring warmth. I'd order chocolate, and she'd order strawberry, and then she'd give me these big sad eyes until I agreed to switch. Every single time. Grace did the same thing. Noah laughed at the memory. She'd order something healthy, salad, grilled chicken, whatever, and then she'd spend the whole meal stealing food off my plate. I started ordering double portions just to account for the theft. That's Lydia. She never wanted what she had, always wanted what someone else had. Until she had us. Noah looked at Oliver, who was completely absorbed in his ice cream, chocolate smeared across his chin. Then she wanted exactly what she had. She told me once that if she could freeze any moment in time and live in it forever, she'd choose a random Tuesday when nothing special happened, just the three of us eating breakfast together. Celeste was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful, controlled. I've been thinking about what comes next, for all of us. So have I. Oliver deserves to know his family, his heritage, the good parts of it anyway. I agree. And you, Celeste hesitated, her eyes searching his face. You deserve to understand who you married, all of it, not just what she chose to tell you. What are you suggesting? Come to the estate, tomorrow. Bring Oliver. I'll show you where Lydia grew up, where she became the person who eventually became Grace. There are photographs, home videos, things she left behind when she ran. I think, she paused, steadying herself. I think it might help. Both of us. Noah thought about the mansion on Ocean View Drive with its marble floors and its portrait of his dead wife and its echoes of a life Grace had fled. The idea of walking through those halls, seeing the cage she'd escaped from, made something in his stomach clench with apprehension. But Celeste was right. He needed to understand, and Oliver deserved to know where he came from. Okay, Noah said. Tomorrow. Celeste nodded, and something in her expression relaxed. Relief, maybe, or gratitude, or simply the satisfaction of a plan coming together. There's something else. Her voice dropped, becoming almost conspiratorial. Something I haven't told you yet. What is it? When my mother died, she left everything to me. The company, the properties, the investments, all of it. Billions of dollars, Noah. More money than anyone could spend in 100 lifetimes. And legally, Lydia was entitled to half of it. My mother disinherited her when she disappeared, but there were provisions. If Lydia ever returned, if she ever came back to the family, she would have been restored to her rightful share. Celeste met his eyes directly. Lydia is dead, but her son isn't. Noah felt the ground shift beneath his feet. What are you saying? I'm saying that Oliver is a ward, by blood, by right, by every legal standard that matters. He's entitled to his mother's inheritance, and I intend to see that he gets it. That's millions of dollars. Hundreds of millions. Billions, actually. Split correctly. Yes. Noah's head was spinning. He looked at Oliver, still happily eating ice cream, completely unaware that his life had just been transformed. A moment ago, he'd been the son of a struggling delivery driver, growing up in a cramped apartment, inheriting nothing but love and memories. Now he was heir to a fortune that Noah couldn't even comprehend. I don't want your money, Noah said slowly. That's not why I came to your house. That's not why I'm here. I know. Celeste's voice was gentle. That's why I'm telling you. Because you're the kind of person who doesn't want it, which means you're the kind of person who can be trusted with it. Oliver's 5 years old. He doesn't need billions of dollars. He needs stability and love and a father who's present. He can have all of those things and also have financial security. They're not mutually exclusive. Noah shook his head, overwhelmed. This is too much. It's too fast. A week ago, I was a delivery driver with a dead wife and a son who missed her. Now I'm standing here talking about inheritances and family fortunes, and I don't know how to process any of it. You don't have to process it all at once. Celeste reached out and touched his arm, a gesture that felt surprisingly natural despite how recently they'd been strangers. Just come tomorrow, see the house. Let Oliver explore. We'll take it one step at a time. And the money? We'll figure that out later. Together. Together. The word echoed in Noah's mind, carrying implications he wasn't ready to examine. He looked at Celeste, at her silver blonde hair and her sharp cheekbones and her eyes that held so much pain, and he saw something he hadn't expected. He saw a woman who was just as lost as he was, just as broken, just as desperate for something to hold on to. Okay, he said finally, one step at a time. Celeste smiled, a real smile, not the controlled expression she'd worn at their first meeting, and Noah felt something warm kindle in his chest. It wasn't attraction, not exactly. It was something more fundamental. Recognition, maybe. The sense of meeting someone who understood your specific brand of grief because they carried the same weight themselves. They finished their ice cream and walked back to their cars, Oliver chattering the whole way about birds and feathers and wings and flying to heaven. The sun was starting to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Thank you, Celeste said as they reached Noah's battered van. For today. For letting me meet him. For not slamming the door in my face when I showed up at your life and turned everything upside down. You didn't turn anything upside down, Noah replied. You just showed me that it was upside down all along and I didn't know it. Celeste laughed softly. Is that supposed to make me feel better? I don't know, does it? She considered the question seriously, her head tilted to one side. Actually, yes. Somehow it does. They stood there for a moment, two people at the beginning of something they couldn't name. Then Oliver tugged at Noah's hand, breaking the spell. Daddy, I'm tired. Can we go home now? Yeah, buddy, we can go home. Noah opened the car door and helped Oliver into his booster seat. Before he got in himself, he turned back to Celeste one last time. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock? 10 o'clock. I'll leave the gate open for you. See you then. He drove home through streets that looked different somehow, like someone had adjusted the color settings on the world while he wasn't paying attention. Oliver fell asleep in the back seat, his feather clutched in his fist, chocolate still smeared on his chin. Noah looked at him in the rearview mirror and thought about Grace, about Lydia, about the woman who had been both and neither, who had loved him with everything she had while keeping so much hidden. I'm starting to understand, he said quietly, to his sleeping son, to his dead wife, to the empty air. I'm starting to understand why you did what you did. And I forgive you. I forgive all of it. The words felt right somehow, true in a way that surprised him. He was still angry, still confused, still grieving a woman he'd never fully known. But beneath all that, something else was growing. Not closure. It was too soon for that. But maybe the beginning of acceptance, and the beginning of something new. The next morning, Noah woke to Oliver jumping on his bed, demanding pancakes and announcing that today they were going to see the big house where Mommy grew up. How do you know that's where we're going? Noah asked, rubbing sleep from his eyes. I'm smart, Oliver said simply. Also, you talk in your sleep. Noah made pancakes, slightly burnt, the way Oliver preferred them, and tried to prepare his son for what they might find at the Ward estate. He talked about big houses and old families and how sometimes people have complicated histories that are hard to explain. Oliver listened with unusual patience, then asked the only question that mattered to him. Will there be more gummy bears? Probably, Noah admitted. Then I'm ready. They drove to Ocean View Drive with the windows down, singing along badly to the radio. The morning was clear and bright, the kind of spring day that made everything feel possible. Noah tried to hold on to that feeling as the mansion came into view, tried not to let the grandeur of it overwhelm him. The gates were open, as promised. They drove up the long, winding driveway, past the manicured gardens and the bronze horse fountain, and parked in front of the main entrance. Celeste was waiting for them on the steps. She'd dressed casually again, and she was holding something in her hands. A photo album, Noah realized as they got closer. Old and worn, the kind of album people kept before everything went digital. Good morning, she said, her voice warm in a way it hadn't been during their first meeting. Welcome back. This place is so big. Oliver was spinning in circles, trying to take in everything at once. Is there a swimming pool? Are there horses? Can I see the horses? Celeste laughed. There's a pool. No horses anymore, I'm afraid. We had to sell them after my mother died. But there are gardens and a greenhouse and a library with more books than you've ever seen. I've seen a lot of books. The library at school has 1,000,000. This library has 2,000,000. Oliver's eyes went wide. That's impossible. Come see for yourself. She led them inside, and Noah found himself walking through the same marble foyer where his world had collapsed a week ago. The portrait of Grace, Lydia, still hung above the fireplace, but it looked different now, less accusatory, more welcoming. I had them clean it, Celeste said, noticing his gaze. She deserved that much. They spent the morning exploring the house. Celeste showed them Lydia's old bedroom, preserved exactly as she'd left it 13 years ago. Posters on the walls, books on the shelves, a half-finished painting on an easel by the window. She wanted to be an artist, Celeste said, touching the painting gently. Our mother thought it was frivolous. She wanted Lydia to study business, take her place in the company. They fought about it constantly. Noah looked at the painting, a landscape, bright with color, full of light and movement. Grace painted too, watercolors mostly. She never showed them to anyone except me. Some things survive even the deepest reinvention. Oliver had found a box of old toys in the closet and was examining them with archaeological interest. Were these Mommy's toys? They were, Celeste confirmed, kneeling beside him. That bear was her favorite. She called him Mr. Buttons because one of his eyes was a button instead of a bead. Oliver picked up the bear reverently, holding it like the sacred object it was. Can I keep him? Celeste looked at Noah, who nodded. He's yours now, she said. I think your mommy would want you to have him. They moved through the house room by room, and with each new space, Celeste shared another piece of Lydia's history. The kitchen where she'd learned to bake cookies with the cook, the garden where she'd played hide and seek, the study where she'd confronted their mother about the arranged marriage, the last real conversation they'd ever had. This is where it happened, Celeste said quietly, standing in the doorway of a dark-paneled room lined with bookcases. This is where she said no, and everything fell apart. Noah stepped into the room, feeling the weight of its history. He could almost see them, Victoria Ward behind her massive desk, Lydia standing defiant in front of her, Celeste hovering helplessly in the doorway. What did she say? He asked. Exactly. Celeste closed her eyes, summoning the memory. She said, I would rather die than spend my life as someone else's possession. I would rather disappear than become a trophy wife for a man I don't love. And if you try to force me, Mother, I will make sure the whole world knows exactly what kind of person you really are. That sounds like Grace. It sounds like Lydia, the bravest person I've ever known. Celeste opened her eyes, and they were bright with tears. Our mother didn't take it well. She called Lydia ungrateful, delusional, mentally unwell. She said no daughter of hers would speak to her that way, and then she picked up the phone and called the hospital. In front of Lydia? Right in front of her. Made the arrangements while Lydia stood there listening. It was a power play, our mother's way of showing that she controlled everything, that resistance was futile. Celeste's voice hardened. But she underestimated Lydia. She always underestimated her. They stood in silence for a moment, surrounded by ghosts. I'm glad she got away, Noah said finally. Whatever else happened, whatever lies she told, I'm glad she escaped this. So am I. Celeste reached out and took his hand, the second time she'd touched him voluntarily, and squeezed it gently. And I'm glad she found you. The afternoon passed in a blur of stories and discoveries. Celeste showed them the photo album she'd been carrying, hundreds of pictures of Lydia growing up, from a tiny baby in an enormous nursery to a young woman on the cusp of escape. Noah studied each image, looking for traces of the Grace he'd known in the Lydia who'd existed before. She was there, in the way Lydia smiled at the camera, in the way she held herself, in the stubborn tilt of her chin that Oliver had inherited. The same woman, wearing different masks. Can I have some of these? Noah asked. For Oliver, so he can see where his mother came from. Take whatever you want. I have copies. They had lunch in the garden, surrounded by flowers that Celeste said Lydia had planted herself as a teenager. Oliver ran through the hedges, playing some elaborate game of his own invention, while the adults sat on a stone bench and talked. "This must be strange for you," Celeste said, "being here, seeing all of this." "It's overwhelming," Noah admitted, "but it helps. Understanding where she came from helps me understand who she was." "And who was she? To you, I mean. Not Lydia Ward, heiress and escapee. Grace Ramsey, your wife." Noah thought about the question carefully before answering. "She was home. That's the only way I can describe it. Before I met her, I was just floating through life, not really connected to anything. And then she appeared, and suddenly everything had meaning. I wanted to build something, be someone, create a life worth living. She made me want to be better than I was. She did the same thing for me when we were kids." Celeste's voice was soft with memory. "Our mother was so cold, so distant. But Lydia was warmth and light. She made our house feel like a home, even when everything else was falling apart. It sounds like she saved us both." "She did, and then she left, and I had to learn how to save myself." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Oliver explore the garden. The sun was starting to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. "I should get him home," Noah said reluctantly. "He'll be impossible if he misses his nap." "Of course." Celeste stood, brushing grass from her jeans. "But come back, please. Anytime you want. This house should have life in it again. It's been a mausoleum for too long." "We will." They collected Oliver, who was reluctant to leave his new kingdom, and walked back to the front of the house. As Noah was helping his son into the car, Celeste touched his arm. "There's something I want to give you," she said. "Wait here." She disappeared inside for a moment, then returned carrying a small wooden box. It was old and ornate, the kind of box that held precious things. "This was Lydia's," Celeste said, placing it in his hands. "She kept her most treasured possessions in it. Letters, photographs, little mementos. When she ran, she left it behind. Whether by accident or intentionally, I never knew. I've kept it all these years, hoping someday I'd have the chance to return it to her." Noah opened the box carefully. Inside were exactly what Celeste had described, a collection of small treasures that told the story of a young woman's life. A dried flower pressed between glass, a movie ticket stub, a handwritten poem, and at the bottom, a photograph Noah had never seen. It was Grace, Lydia, sitting on a beach somewhere, laughing at the camera. She couldn't have been more than 20. Her hair was wild from the wind, her face was tanned and freckled, and she looked happier than Noah had ever seen her. "That was taken the summer before she ran," Celeste said quietly. "We went to the coast together, just the two of us, while our mother was away on business. 3 days of freedom. 3 days of pretending we were normal people with normal lives." Noah stared at the photograph, at this glimpse of Grace before she became Grace. She looked so young, so hopeful, so unaware of everything that was coming. "Thank you," he said, his voice rough. "For this, for everything." Celeste nodded, her eyes bright. "Take care of each other, you and Oliver. That's all she would have wanted." "We will." He got in the van, started the engine, and pulled away from the mansion. In the rear-view mirror, he could see Celeste standing on the steps, watching them go. She raised her hand in a small wave, and something about the gesture, so ordinary, so human, made Noah's heart clench. Oliver was already half asleep, clutching Mr. Buttons in one arm and his pigeon feather in the other. The treasures of 2 different lives, combined in the hands of a 5-year-old who understood nothing and everything at once. "Daddy?" Oliver murmured drowsily. "Yeah, buddy. Aunt Celeste is nice. Yeah, she is. I think Mommy would like her." Noah blinked back tears. "I think Mommy did like her. Very much." "Good." Oliver yawned, his eyes closing completely. "That's good." Within moments, he was asleep. Noah drove home through streets that were becoming familiar again, that were starting to feel less like obstacles and more like pathways. The wooden box sat on the passenger seat beside him, full of secrets he had yet to discover. There was still so much he didn't know, so much pain to process, so many questions to answer, so many pieces of Grace's puzzle still scattered across the floor. But for the first time since that day in the mansion when his world had cracked open, Noah felt something other than confusion and grief. He felt grateful. Grateful for the 5 years he'd had with Grace. Grateful for Oliver, who carried her forward into the future. Grateful for Celeste, who was helping him understand the woman he'd loved but never fully known. And somewhere, beneath all of that, grateful for something else. Something he couldn't quite name yet. Something that felt like the first green shoots pushing up through winter soil. Something that felt like the beginning of healing. The weeks that followed the visit to the Ward estate passed like water through fingers, each day blending into the next in a rhythm that felt both familiar and completely new. Noah continued his deliveries, continued making burnt pancakes for Oliver, continued sleeping alone in a bed that still felt too large. But something had shifted beneath the surface of his ordinary life, something he couldn't quite name but could feel with every breath. Celeste became a regular presence in their world. She would call in the evenings after Oliver was asleep, and they would talk for hours about everything and nothing. She told him stories about Lydia's childhood that made him laugh until his sides ached. He told her about Grace's quirks and habits, the small intimacies of marriage that no one else would ever know. Together, they were reconstructing a woman who had been two people, filling in the gaps that each of them had carried alone. She used to sleepwalk, Noah said one night, lying on his couch with the phone pressed to his ear. In the first year of our marriage, I'd wake up and find her standing by the window, staring out at nothing. When I'd ask her what she was looking for, she'd say a way out and then go back to bed. She never remembered it in the morning. She sleepwalked as a child too, Celeste said, her voice soft through the phone line. Our mother had the staff lock her bedroom door at night because she was afraid Lydia would hurt herself, but that just made it worse. She'd wake up in the morning with bruises on her hands from trying to get out. Jesus. Our mother's solution to everything was containment. If she couldn't control something, she'd lock it away until it stopped being a problem. Celeste paused. Lydia was always a problem she couldn't solve. These conversations became the architecture of Noah's evenings, something he looked forward to with an intensity that surprised him. Celeste understood things about Grace that no one else could, and in sharing that understanding she had become something unexpected. Not just Oliver's aunt, not just the bearer of his dead wife's secrets, something more, something he wasn't ready to examine too closely. Oliver, for his part, had fallen completely in love with his aunt. He talked about her constantly, asked when they could visit the big house again, drew pictures of the garden and the fountain and the room with 2 million books. He slept with Mr. Buttons every night and informed anyone who would listen that his mommy had been a princess who lived in a castle. Not exactly a princess, Noah said gently one morning, watching his son color a picture of a crown. More like a person who had a lot of money, but didn't want it. Why wouldn't you want money? Oliver asked, genuinely baffled. Money buys gummy bears. Some things are more important than gummy bears. That's crazy talk, Daddy. Noah laughed, but the question stayed with him throughout the day. Why hadn't Grace wanted the money? Why had she chosen a life of struggle over a life of luxury? The answer, he knew, was more complicated than any 5-year-old could understand. It was about freedom and control and the price of being owned by someone who saw love as a transaction. But Oliver would learn that eventually. He would grow up and read his mother's journal and understand the full weight of her choices. For now, let him believe in princesses and castles and the simple economics of gummy bears. A month after the visit to the estate, Celeste invited them to dinner at a restaurant downtown. Not Marchetti's this time, but somewhere new, somewhere that didn't carry the weight of their first emotional conversation. She'd chosen a family-friendly place with crayons on the table and a kid's menu that Oliver studied with the seriousness of a wine sommelier. I'll have the chicken fingers, he announced after careful deliberation, and the mac and cheese, and the chocolate milk, and the ice cream for dessert. That's a lot of food, Noah said. Are you sure you can eat all that? I'm a growing boy. Aunt Celeste says so. Celeste smiled at this, and Noah noticed again how different she looked when she smiled. The sharp edges of her face softened, the ice in her eyes melted. She was beautiful, he realized with a jolt of something uncomfortable. She had probably always been beautiful, but he hadn't let himself see it before. Your aunt is very wise, Noah said, dragging his attention back to the menu. But maybe we start with chicken fingers and see how we feel after. Dinner was easy in a way that surprised him. Oliver dominated the conversation with stories about school and friends, and a detailed explanation of why ladybugs were the best insects, allowing Noah and Celeste to exchange amused glances over his head. It felt domestic, Noah realized. It felt like something families did. The thought made his stomach clench with guilt. After dinner, they walked to a nearby park where Oliver could burn off some energy before bedtime. The evening was warm, the kind of perfect spring night that made you believe anything was possible. Fireflies were starting to emerge, blinking their cold light in the gathering dusk. "Watch, Daddy, watch!" Oliver sprinted toward the playground, his small legs pumping furiously. "I'm watching," Noah called back, settling onto a bench near the swings. Celeste sat beside him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something light and floral that reminded him inexplicably of Grace. "He's incredible," Celeste said, watching Oliver climb the jungle gym with fearless determination. "He has so much of her in him. He has a lot of himself in him, too. Grace used to say he came into the world with his personality fully formed, and our job was just to keep him alive until he could take over." That sounds like something she would say. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Oliver play. The fireflies were multiplying now, turning the park into something magical, something out of a fairy tale. "I've been thinking," Celeste said finally, her voice careful in a way that put Noah on alert. "About us." The word hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. "What about us?" Noah asked, keeping his voice neutral. "About what this is. What we're doing. Where it's going. We're getting to know each other. For Oliver's sake." "Is that all it is?" Noah turned to look at her, really look at her, and saw something in her expression that made his heart skip. She was nervous, he realized. Celeste Ward, billionaire heiress who controlled boardrooms and commanded respect with a glance, was nervous about what he might say. "I don't know," he admitted. "I don't know what this is." "Neither do I. And that terrifies me." "Why?" She was quiet for a long moment, her eyes fixed on Oliver in the distance. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Because she was my sister, Noah. She was my baby sister, and I loved her more than anything in the world. And now I find myself looking at you and feeling things I shouldn't feel, wanting things I have no right to want. And I don't know if that makes me a terrible person or just a human being who's been alone for too long." Noah's throat tightened. He wanted to say something comforting, something that would ease the anguish in her voice, but he couldn't because he felt the same thing, the same confusion, the same guilt, the same terrifying pull toward something that seemed both inevitable and impossible. "You're not a terrible person," he managed finally. "How do you know?" "Because I feel it too." Celeste turned to look at him, her eyes wide. "You do?" "I don't know when it started. Maybe that night at Marchetti's, when you cried over her letter. Maybe at the estate, when you gave Oliver that bear. Maybe it was happening all along and I was too scared to admit it." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated by his inability to articulate what he felt. "You're the first person since Grace who's made me feel like I might be okay someday, like there might be something after the grief." "Noah? But I don't know if it's real. I don't know if what I feel is actually about you or if it's about her. You look like her sometimes, you know that? Not physically, but in the way you move, the way you think. And I don't know if I'm falling for you or just falling for the pieces of her I see in you." The words came out harsher than he intended, and he saw Celeste flinch. But she didn't look away. "That's fair," she said quietly. "I've wondered the same thing about myself. Whether I'm drawn to you because of who you are, or because you're the last person who loved her. Because being with you feels like being close to her again. So where does that leave us?" Confused, guilty, completely at sea. Noah laughed despite himself, a bitter sound that echoed in the quiet park. That about sums it up. They sat in silence again, but it was different now, heavier, charged with all the things they'd said and all the things they hadn't. "Maybe we're overthinking this," Celeste said finally. "Maybe we should just stop, step back, focus on Oliver, and forget about whatever this is between us. Is that what you want?" "No." The word came out before she could stop it, raw and honest. No, it's not what I want at all. Then what do you want? She turned to face him fully, and in the firefly light, her eyes were luminous with something that looked like hope and fear in equal measure. I want to stop feeling guilty for being alive, she said. I want to stop punishing myself for caring about someone. I want to honor my sister's memory without being trapped by it forever. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. And I want you to kiss me, just once, so I can know if this is real or if it's just grief wearing a different mask. Noah's heart was pounding so loud he was sure she could hear it. Every rational part of his brain was screaming at him to stop, to think, to remember who this woman was and who her sister had been. But another part of him, a deeper part, was already leaning toward her, already closing the distance between them. Celeste, he whispered, this is insane. I know. Your sister was my wife. I know. If we do this, there's no going back. I know. They were inches apart now, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her breath on his face. Her eyes were searching his, looking for permission, looking for doubt, looking for anything that would tell her to stop. She didn't find it. Noah closed the final distance between them and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, both of them testing the waters of something they'd been circling for weeks. Celeste's lips were soft and warm, and she tasted like the wine they'd had at dinner, and underneath it all was something else, something that felt like coming home to a place he'd never been. Then her hand came up to cup the back of his neck, and the kiss deepened, and Noah forgot about everything except this moment, this woman, this impossible connection they'd found in the wreckage of shared grief. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Celeste's eyes were wide, her cheeks flushed, her carefully composed mask completely shattered. Oh God, she whispered. That was, yeah, I felt, yeah. They stared at each other, equally stunned by what had just happened. Then Celeste let out a shaky laugh. Well, that didn't help at all. What do you mean? I was hoping the kiss would prove that this was just grief, that we were both lonely and sad and projecting our feelings onto each other. She shook her head slowly. But that's not what I felt. What did you feel? I felt you, just you. Not my sister's husband, not Oliver's father, just Noah Ramsey, the man who makes terrible coffee and tells terrible jokes and looks at me like I'm something worth looking at. Her voice caught. I felt something real. Noah wanted to tell her he felt the same thing. He wanted to pull her close and kiss her again and forget about all the reasons why this was complicated and wrong and potentially disastrous. But before he could say anything, a small voice cut through the moment. Daddy? Aunt Celeste? What are you doing? They sprang apart like guilty teenagers. Oliver was standing a few feet away, his head tilted to the side, observing them with the frank curiosity of childhood. We were just talking, Noah said, his voice slightly higher than normal. It looked like kissing. It wasn't kissing, it was close talking. Oliver looked deeply skeptical. That's not a real thing. It is too a real thing. Grown-ups do it all the time. You're being weird, Daddy. Celeste was trying not to laugh and failing miserably. She pressed her hand to her mouth, but her shoulders were shaking with suppressed mirth. Your dad is definitely being weird, she agreed. But that's okay. Weird can be good sometimes. Oliver considered this. I'm hungry. You just ate a whole dinner. That was forever ago. Can we get ice cream? Noah exchanged a look with Celeste over Oliver's head, a look that held questions and promises and the acknowledgement that something had changed between them. Then he turned back to his son. Ice cream sounds perfect. They walked to the ice cream truck together, Oliver between them, holding both their hands. And even though Noah's mind was spinning with everything that had just happened, even though he had no idea what any of this meant or where it was going, he couldn't deny that this felt right. The three of them together, moving through a warm spring evening toward something sweet. The days after the kiss were strange and beautiful and terrifying all at once. Noah and Celeste didn't talk about what had happened, not directly, but there was a new awareness between them, a current that ran beneath every conversation, every shared glance, every accidental touch. They continued their routine of phone calls and visits, of building Oliver's relationship with his aunt, and filling in the gaps of Grace's history. But now there was something else underneath it all, something growing in the spaces between words. Noah found himself thinking about Celeste at odd moments. While making deliveries, he'd wonder what she was doing, what meetings she was attending, whether she was thinking about him too. At night, lying in bed, he'd replay the kiss over and over, remembering the exact moment when he'd stopped feeling guilty and started feeling alive. But the guilt always came back. It would hit him at unexpected moments, sharp and sudden, like a knife between the ribs. He'd be laughing at something Celeste said, and then he'd remember Grace's laugh, and the weight of betrayal would crash down on him. He'd feel Celeste's hand brush against his, and then he'd remember holding Grace's hand on their wedding day, and the shame would be so intense he could barely breathe. He started visiting Grace's grave more often, not the official cemetery where they'd buried her, with its neat rows of headstones and carefully tended grass, but a small memorial they'd created in a park where she used to take Oliver to feed the ducks. Noah had planted a tree there after her death, a young maple that was just starting to spread its branches. "I don't know what I'm doing," he said to the tree one evening while Oliver played nearby. "I don't know if this is moving on or betraying you or something in between. I loved you, Grace. I still love you. But you're gone. And she's here, and I don't know what that means." The tree didn't answer. Trees never did. But a breeze stirred its leaves, and for just a moment, Noah could almost believe that Grace was listening. "She's your sister," he continued, his voice cracking. "Of all the people in the world, I had to fall for your sister. Is that some kind of cosmic joke? Some twist of fate designed to torture both of us?" He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Or is this what you wanted? Is this why you wrote that letter? Why you told me to find Celeste? Did you know this would happen?" The breeze died. The leaves stilled, and Noah was left alone with his questions, as always. 2 weeks after the kiss, Celeste invited them to the estate for Oliver's birthday. The boy was turning 6, and she wanted to throw him a proper party, complete with a bounce house, a magician, and enough cake to feed a small army. "That's too much," Noah protested when she called to outline her plans. "He doesn't need all that. He'd be happy with pizza and a movie. He's my nephew, my only nephew. Please let me spoil him." "You're already spoiling him. The toys, the trips to the zoo, the small fortune in gummy bears you keep buying. That's not spoiling, that's basic aunt behavior." "Celeste." "Noah." Her voice softened. "This is the first birthday I've ever been able to celebrate with him. The first time I've been able to watch him blow out candles and make a wish and know that I'm part of his life. Please don't take that away from me." How could he say no to that? How could he deny her something that meant so much when she'd already lost so much else? "Fine," he sighed, "but no pony rides." "What about a small pony, a miniature one?" "No ponies of any size." "You're no fun, Noah Ramsey." "I've been told." The party was, predictably, spectacular. Oliver ran screaming through the bounce house with a dozen other kids from his school, all of whom were suitably awed by the mansion and its endless wonders. The magician pulled rabbits from hats and cards from thin air, and Oliver declared it the best day of his entire life. But the moment Noah would remember most came later, after the guests had gone and Oliver had collapsed in a sugar coma on the living room couch. He and Celeste were sitting on the terrace, watching the sun set over the gardens, glasses of wine in hand. "Thank you for today," Noah said. "He'll talk about this for years. He deserves it. He deserves everything. He has more than everything now. More than I could ever give him on my own." Celeste turned to look at him, her expression serious. "You've given him the most important thing. You've given him love. Unconditional, constant, unwavering love. That's worth more than all the bounce houses in the world. You're going to make me emotional." "Good. You're too stoic for your own good." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. The air was warm and fragrant with flowers, and somewhere in the distance birds were singing their evening songs. "I've been thinking," Celeste said finally, and there was something in her voice that made Noah tense. The last time she'd started a sentence that way, they'd ended up kissing in a park. "About what?" "About us. About what we're doing. About the fact that we've been dancing around each other for weeks without actually talking about what happened. I've been trying to figure out how I feel." And have you? Noah took a long sip of wine, buying himself time. I know I care about you. I know that when I'm with you, I feel things I haven't felt in a long time. But I also know that you're Grace's sister, and that every time I look at you, part of me sees her, and I don't know if that's fair to you. It's not unfair, Celeste said quietly. I look at you and see the man who made her happy, the father of her child, the life she chose over everything our mother could offer. How could I not see her when I look at you? She's woven into every part of who you are. So where does that leave us? I don't know, but I'm tired of not knowing. I'm tired of second-guessing every feeling, every glance, every moment we share. She set down her wine glass and turned to face him fully. I spent 13 years missing my sister, wondering where she was, whether she was happy, whether she even remembered me. And then I found out she was dead, and I thought I'd never stop grieving. But you and Oliver, you've given me something I never expected to have, a connection to her, a family. Celeste, I'm not asking you to love me, she continued, her voice steady even as her hands trembled. I'm not asking you to forget Grace or replace her or pretend that any of this is simple. I'm just asking you to give this a chance, to let us see what we could be without the guilt and the doubt and the constant fear that we're doing something wrong. Noah wanted to say yes. Every part of him wanted to say yes, to take her in his arms and promise her that they would figure it out together. But the words stuck in his throat, trapped by 3 years of grief and guilt and the ghost of a woman who still haunted his dreams. I need time, he said finally, not to decide how I feel, but to make peace with feeling it. Does that make sense? It makes perfect sense. Celeste's voice was gentle, understanding, free of the disappointment he'd expected. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. You might change your mind. I'm kind of a mess. We're all messes, Noah. Some of us are just better at hiding it. She reached out and took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. But for what it's worth, I think you're a beautiful mess. The best kind of mess. They sat there as the sun finished setting, holding hands in the darkness, two people trying to find their way through the complicated terrain of love and loss. And even though Noah couldn't give her the answer she wanted, even though he was still tangled up in knots of guilt and confusion, he felt something shift inside him. Not resolution, not certainty, but maybe the beginning of acceptance. The weeks that followed were a slow unwinding, a gradual loosening of the knots that had bound Noah's heart for so long. He stopped fighting his feelings for Celeste and started simply observing them, letting them exist without judgment or analysis. He noticed the way his heart jumped when her name appeared on his phone. He noticed the warmth that spread through him when she laughed at one of his terrible jokes. He noticed how natural it felt when the three of them were together, him and Celeste and Oliver, like puzzle pieces that had finally found their proper place. But he also noticed the moments of doubt, the flashes of guilt that still caught him off guard. He noticed the way Grace's photograph seemed to follow him around their small apartment, her painted eyes watching as he slowly opened his heart to another woman. He noticed the tight feeling in his chest whenever Oliver mentioned Mommy and Aunt Celeste in the same breath, as though they were two halves of the same person. One night, about 2 months after the kiss in the park, Noah made a decision. I want to tell you about Grace, he said to Celeste over the phone. Not the woman in the photograph or the sister you remember, the woman I was married to. All of it, the good and the bad. Because if we're going to do this, you need to know who she really was. Not just Lydia who escaped, but Grace who stayed. Celeste was quiet for a moment. Are you sure? No, but I think it's necessary. Then I'm listening. And so Noah talked. He talked about how Grace burned every meal she ever cooked but insisted on trying anyway. About how she cried during commercials but stayed dry-eyed through funerals because she said real grief was too private for tears. About how she would wake up in the middle of the night, gasping from nightmares she refused to discuss, and he would hold her until she fell asleep again. He talked about their fights, which were rare but fierce, both of them too stubborn to back down. About the time she threw a plate at his head because he'd forgotten their anniversary, and the time he slept on the couch for a week because he'd made a comment about her cooking that she'd taken as an insult. About the making up afterward, which was always worth the fight. He talked about her illness, about the headaches that started as annoyances and became harbingers of something terrible, about the diagnosis that had come too late, the cancer that had spread too far, the treatments that had bought them months instead of years, about the final weeks when she was too weak to get out of bed, and he would lie beside her and tell her stories about the life they would have had if fate had been kinder. "She asked me to be happy," Noah said, his voice rough with tears he couldn't stop. "In the end, she made me promise that I wouldn't spend the rest of my life mourning her. She said she'd haunt me if I did, and not in a friendly ghost kind of way." Celeste laughed through her own tears. "That sounds like her. She always did hate moping. I've been breaking that promise for 3 years, punishing myself for surviving when she didn't. But lately, I've started to think maybe she was right. Maybe being happy isn't a betrayal. Maybe it's exactly what she would have wanted." "She would have wanted it," Celeste said softly. "I know she would have. She loved you, Noah. She wouldn't want you to spend the rest of your life alone." "Even if being not alone means being with her sister?" The question hung in the air, heavy with everything they'd been dancing around for months. "I think," Celeste said slowly, "that Lydia would have seen a certain poetry in it. The two people who loved her most, finding each other through their shared grief. She always did have a flair for the dramatic." "You think she'd approve?" "I think she'd say it took us long enough." Noah laughed, a genuine laugh that surprised him with its warmth. "You're probably right. I'm always right. Ask anyone." They talked until late into the night, sharing memories and tears and the fragile beginning of something new. When Noah finally hung up the phone, his face was wet and his heart was lighter than it had been in years. The next morning he woke up early and drove to Grace's tree. The maple had grown since he'd planted it, its branches reaching toward the sky like arms raised in celebration. He sat beneath it, watching the sun rise over the park, and spoke to his dead wife one last time. "I think I'm falling in love with her," he said. "Your sister, the woman you ran from and missed and never stopped loving. I don't know if that's fate or coincidence or some kind of cosmic joke, but it's happening whether I understand it or not." A bird landed on one of the branches, tilting its head as if listening. "I'm not going to forget you. I'm not going to stop loving you. You'll always be Oliver's mother, always be the woman who saved me from myself, always be the first great love of my life." Noah's voice broke, but he pushed through. "But I think there might be room for another love, a different love, something that doesn't replace what we had but grows alongside it." The bird chirped once, then flew away. "If you can hear me, wherever you are, I hope you know that I'm okay. Oliver is okay. We're going to be okay." He placed his hand on the rough bark of the tree, feeling the life pulsing beneath it. "And I hope you know that I'm grateful for every moment we had, for the son you gave me, for the path that led me to your sister." He paused, a small smile crossing his face. "I hope you know that I'm finally ready to keep my promise. I'm finally ready to be happy." The morning light filtered through the leaves, casting dancing shadows on the ground around him. And for just a moment, Noah could have sworn he felt something, a warmth, a presence, a whisper of peace. Then the moment passed, and he was alone again. But it was a different kind of alone, an alone that felt like a beginning rather than an ending. He got up, brushed the grass from his jeans, and walked back to his car. He had somewhere to be. The drive to the Ward estate took 45 minutes, and Noah spent every second of it rehearsing what he wanted to say. By the time he pulled up to the mansion, he'd gone through a dozen versions of the speech, each one more inadequate than the last. In the end, he decided to wing it. Celeste answered the door herself, still in her pajamas, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger without her usual polish, softer somehow, and Noah felt his heart clench at the sight of her. "Noah, what are you doing here? It's 7 a.m. I know, I'm sorry, I had to, can I come in?" She stepped aside, her expression a mixture of confusion and concern. "Is everything okay? Is Oliver? Oliver's fine. He's with Mrs. Patterson. This isn't about Oliver." "Then what?" "It's about us." Celeste went still. "Oh. I went to see Grace this morning. Her tree, I mean. The memorial." Noah ran a hand through his hair, struggling to find the right words. "I told her about you. About us. about everything I've been feeling and fighting and failing to understand. What did she say? Trees don't talk, but I think she would have approved. I think she would have wanted this. He stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in Celeste's eyes. I'm done waiting, Celeste. I'm done second-guessing and overthinking and punishing myself for wanting something good. I love you. I love you. And I'm terrified. And I don't know how any of this is going to work, but I know I want to try. Celeste's eyes filled with tears. Noah, you don't have to say anything. You don't have to feel the same way. I just needed you to know. I needed to say it out loud, to make it real. You idiot, Celeste whispered. You beautiful, oblivious idiot. I've been in love with you for weeks. You have? Of course I have. I've been trying to tell you in 1,000 different ways, but you were so tangled up in your guilt that you couldn't see it. I see it now. Do you? Yes. Noah reached out and cupped her face in his hands, marveling at the softness of her skin, the warmth of her breath against his fingers. I see you, Celeste. Not Grace's sister, not Oliver's aunt, you, and I love what I see. Then stop talking, she said, and kiss me. He did. This kiss was different from their first one. That kiss had been tentative, questioning, two people testing uncertain ground. This kiss was a declaration. It was a promise. It was two people finally letting themselves want what they'd been denying for months. When they broke apart, both of them were crying and laughing at the same time, overwhelmed by the enormity of what they'd just admitted. This is insane, Celeste said. You know that, right? This whole situation is completely, utterly insane. I know. People are going to talk. They're going to judge us. They're going to say terrible things about how quickly you moved on, about how inappropriate this is. Let them talk. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who will be painted as the scheming sister who swooped in on her sibling's husband. Anyone who says that doesn't know you, doesn't know us. Noah pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. I don't care what people think. I only care about what's real. And what's real? This. He kissed her forehead. This is real. You and me and Oliver and whatever future we build together. That's the only thing that matters. Celeste buried her face in his chest, and he felt her shoulders shake with sobs she'd been holding back for far too long. I never thought I'd have this, she whispered. A family. A home. Someone who loves me for me. Not for the Ward name or the Ward fortune. Well, get used to it, because you're stuck with us now. Is that a threat or a promise? Both. They stood there in the foyer of the mansion, holding each other as the morning light streamed through the windows. Above them, the portrait of Grace, Lydia, looked down with her enigmatic, almost smile, watching over the two people who had loved her best. And for the first time since her death, Noah didn't feel haunted by that gaze. He felt blessed. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of adjustments and revelations. Noah and Celeste agreed to take things slowly, to ease Oliver into understanding what was happening between the adults in his life. But slow was a relative term, and before long they were spending more nights at the estate than apart, building a new rhythm that included all three of them. Oliver, with the adaptability of childhood, accepted the changes with remarkable grace. He seemed to understand, in his intuitive 5-year-old way, that something important was shifting. He started referring to Celeste as my Celeste when talking to his friends, and Noah caught him once telling another child that he was very lucky because he had 2 moms, one in heaven and one on earth. The remark made Noah cry. Celeste too, when he told her about it later. He's extraordinary, she said, wiping her eyes. How did you raise such an extraordinary child? I had help. Grace did most of the heavy lifting before she got sick. And you've been doing it alone ever since. That's not nothing, Noah. It felt like nothing. It felt like failing most days. You didn't fail. Look at him. Through the window, they could see Oliver playing in the garden, chasing butterflies with single-minded determination. He's happy. He's healthy. He's loved. That's not failure. That's the opposite of failure. Noah pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just weren't paying attention. They were happy. really, genuinely happy in a way that Noah hadn't known he could be again. There were still hard days, days when the guilt crept in, days when Grace's absence felt like a physical wound, days when the complications of their situation seemed insurmountable. But there were more good days than bad, and that ratio was slowly, steadily improving. And then came the night that changed everything again. It was a Thursday, unremarkable in every way, when Celeste's phone rang during dinner. She glanced at the screen, frowned, and excused herself to take the call. Noah watched her go, a vague unease stirring in his stomach. Something about the way her face had changed when she saw the caller ID, the sudden tension in her shoulders. 5 minutes later, she returned. Her face was pale, her hands were shaking, and she looked like she'd seen a ghost. "What is it?" Noah asked, rising from his chair. "What's wrong?" Celeste looked at him, and her eyes were filled with something he couldn't identify. Fear? Disbelief? Both? "That was my mother's lawyer," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's been a discovery, something in my mother's private records that was sealed until 5 years after her death." "What kind of discovery?" Celeste swallowed hard. "Before she died, my mother hired a private investigator, one we didn't know about. He found Lydia, found Grace, 2 years before she died. My mother knew where she was. She knew about you, about Oliver, about everything." Noah felt the blood drain from his face. "What?" "She knew, Noah. My mother knew that Lydia was alive and married and had a child, and she never told me. She never did anything about it. She just watched from a distance." "Why? Why wouldn't she? I don't know." Celeste's voice cracked. "But there's more. The lawyer says there's a letter my mother wrote to Lydia before she died. It was supposed to be delivered after both of them were gone, but there was some kind of mix-up, and it was never sent. A letter from Victoria Ward to Grace? To Lydia. To the daughter she spent 13 years hunting, the daughter she drove away with her control and her cruelty and her complete inability to love without possessing." Celeste's hands were still shaking. "It's at the lawyer's office. He wants to know what we want to do with it." Noah looked at his phone, at the half-eaten meal on the table, at Oliver, who was watching them with wide, worried eyes from across the room. "We read it," he said. "We read it together. And whatever's in there, we face it the same way." "Together?" "Together." Celeste nodded, her jaw set with determination even as tears streamed down her cheeks. "Together," she repeated. And Noah knew, with absolute certainty, that whatever came next, they would face it exactly that way. The lawyer's office was cold and sterile, all chrome furniture and glass walls that made Noah feel like he was trapped inside an aquarium. He sat beside Celeste in matching leather chairs, their hands intertwined so tightly that his fingers had gone numb. Neither of them had slept the night before, and the exhaustion showed in the dark circles under their eyes and the tremor in their voices when they spoke. Oliver was at home with Mrs. Patterson, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to break over their small, fragile family. Noah had wanted it that way. Whatever was in Victoria Ward's letter, it wasn't meant for a 6-year-old's ears. The lawyer was a thin man with silver hair and the kind of face that revealed nothing. He'd introduced himself as Harrison Webb, senior partner, executor of Victoria Ward's estate. He'd been working for the Ward family for over 30 years, he said, and this was the most unusual situation he'd ever encountered. "Before I give you the letter," Webb said, his voice carefully neutral, "I need to explain the circumstances of its discovery. Mrs. Ward left explicit instructions that certain documents were to remain sealed until 5 years after her death. She was very particular about the timing, though she never explained why." 5 years, Celeste murmured. She wanted to make sure she was really gone, that no one could question her or demand explanations. Perhaps. In any case, when we opened the sealed file last week, we found several items: financial records, personal correspondence, and this. He held up an envelope, yellowed with age, with a single name written across the front in elegant cursive. Lydia. Noah felt Celeste's grip tighten on his hand. "There was also a note attached," Webb continued, "instructing us to deliver the letter to Lydia Ward or her next of kin. Given that Ms. Ward is deceased, that would be you, Ms. Celeste, as her sister." However, given the contents of the letter and the existence of Ms. Lydia's son, I felt it appropriate to include both of you in this meeting. You've read it? Noah asked. I have. Estate law requires me to review all sealed documents before release. Webb's expression flickered with something that might have been sympathy. I should warn you, the contents are quite personal. Mrs. Ward was a complicated woman, and this letter reveals a side of her that few people ever saw. Just give it to us, Celeste said, her voice hard. Whatever's in there, we can handle it. Webb nodded and slid the envelope across the desk. Celeste picked it up with trembling hands, staring at her mother's handwriting as if it might bite her. Do you want me to read it? Noah asked gently. No, I need to do this myself. She took a deep breath, broke the seal, and unfolded the pages within. The letter was written in the same elegant script as the envelope, but the handwriting deteriorated as it went on, becoming shaky and uneven, as if the writer had been struggling to hold the pen. Celeste began to read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. My dearest Lydia, if you are reading this, then I am dead, and the secrets I've kept can finally be told. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I need you to understand, even if understanding changes nothing. Celeste paused, her throat working. Noah squeezed her hand, urging her to continue. I found you 3 years ago. My investigator tracked you to a small town on the coast, to a modest apartment, to a life so different from the one I'd planned for you that I almost didn't believe it was real. I watched from a distance as you walked to work, as you shopped for groceries, as you lived the ordinary life you'd chosen over everything I could offer. She was watching, Noah breathed. All that time she was watching. I saw your husband, Celeste continued reading, her voice cracking. Noah, a delivery driver with kind eyes and calloused hands, and absolutely nothing to recommend him except the way he looked at you. Like you were the sun and the moon and every star in the sky. Like you were everything. Noah felt tears prick his eyes. He'd never met Victoria Ward, never even seen a photograph of her. But in that moment, he felt a strange kinship with the woman who had watched from the shadows as her daughter built a life without her. I hated him at first. This nobody who had stolen my daughter, who had given you a life of struggle when you could have had a life of luxury. I wanted to destroy him. I wanted to tear your world apart and drag you back where you belonged. But I didn't. Do you know why, Lydia? Because I saw the way you smiled. I saw you laughing on the street, holding his hand, your face lit up with a joy I had never been able to give you. And I realized with a pain I cannot describe that you were happy. Truly happy. Happier than you had ever been in my house, under my control, living the life I had designed for you. Celeste's voice broke completely. She lowered the letter, unable to continue, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Let me, Noah said gently, taking the pages from her trembling hands. He scanned ahead, finding where she'd left off, and continued reading. I spent months wrestling with what to do. Part of me wanted to reach out, to beg your forgiveness, to try to rebuild what I had destroyed. But I knew you would never trust me. I knew that if I entered your life again, I would only bring the chaos and control that you had worked so hard to escape. So I made a decision, the hardest decision of my life. I decided to let you go. Noah paused, absorbing the weight of those words. Victoria Ward, the woman who never lost, who never surrendered, who pursued what she wanted with relentless determination, she had chosen to let her daughter go. I stopped the investigation. I destroyed the files. I told no one what I had found, not even Celeste, though it broke my heart to keep this secret from her. I knew she would want to find you, to reconnect, to heal the wound that your disappearance had left in both our lives. But I also knew that if she found you, she would tell you about me. And I couldn't bear the thought of you looking over your shoulder for the rest of your life, waiting for me to appear and ruin everything. Then I saw your son. Noah's breath caught. He looked up at Celeste, who was watching him with red-rimmed eyes, her face pale and streaked with tears. My investigator sent me photographs. A little boy with dark curls and his mother's eyes, playing in a park, laughing at something his father had said. Oliver, my grandson. The child I would never know, the legacy I would never claim. I went to the park myself once, sat on a bench and watched him play from a distance. He was beautiful, Lydia, so full of life and joy and everything good in the world. And I knew, looking at him, that you had succeeded where I had failed. You had broken the cycle. You had created something pure and untainted by the poison that ran through our family. I wanted to approach him, to introduce myself, to be part of his life in some small way. But I couldn't, because to know him would be to risk exposing you. And I had already taken so much from you. I couldn't take your peace as well. Noah set the letter down, unable to continue. His hands were shaking, his vision blurred with tears. She met him, he managed. She saw Oliver. She was there in that park, and we never knew. Keep reading, Celeste whispered. Please, I need to know how it ends. Noah picked up the letter again, scanning through the final paragraphs. I'm dying now. The doctors say I have months, perhaps weeks, and I find that facing death clarifies things in ways that living never could. I regret so much, Lydia. I regret the control and the manipulation and the inability to love you without trying to own you. I regret driving you away. I regret every harsh word and every impossible expectation and every moment when I chose the Ward legacy over your happiness. But I don't regret letting you go. That one decision, made in a moment of rare clarity, may be the only truly good thing I ever did for you. I gave you your freedom, even though it cost me everything. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and you're still living the life you chose. I hope you're still happy. I hope Noah still looks at you like you're everything. I hope Oliver grows up strong and kind and free, unshackled by the weight of our family's expectations. And if Celeste is there with you, and I suspect she might be because your sister's love for you never wavered, even when mine failed, please tell her that I'm sorry. Sorry for keeping this secret. Sorry for denying her the chance to reconnect with you while you were still alive. I thought I was protecting her, but I see now that I was only protecting myself. I love you, Lydia. I know I never said it enough. I know my love was twisted and controlling and ultimately destructive, but it was real. It was the realest thing I ever felt. And I will go to my grave wishing I had known how to express it without crushing you in the process. Be happy, my darling girl. Be free. And know that somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, your mother is watching over you. Not to control, not to judge, just to love, the way I should have loved you all along. Forever yours, Mother. The letter ended there. Noah set it down on the desk, his hands still trembling, his heart aching with an emotion he couldn't name. Beside him, Celeste was crying openly now, her composure completely shattered. He pulled her into his arms and held her while she sobbed, her tears soaking through his shirt, her body shaking with grief for a mother she had hated and loved in equal measure. She knew, Celeste gasped between sobs. She knew, and she let her go. She actually let her go. She loved her, Noah said, his own voice rough with tears. In her own broken way, she loved her. I spent years hating her, years thinking she was a monster who only cared about control. But she gave Lydia the one thing she had always wanted. She gave her freedom. Maybe that's what love looks like sometimes. Letting go, even when it breaks you. They held each other in that cold, sterile office, two people drowning in the complexity of family and love and the secrets that bind us together even as they tear us apart. The lawyer sat quietly, giving them space, understanding that some moments require silence. Finally, Celeste pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "What do we do now?" she asked. "We go home," Noah said. "We hold Oliver. We tell him someday, when he's old enough to understand, about the grandmother who loved him from a distance because she loved his mother enough to stay away. And us?" Noah cupped her face in his hands, looking into her eyes with all the certainty he possessed. "We live," he said. "We love. We honor Grace's memory by building the life she wanted for us, the life your mother, in her final act of grace, made possible." Celeste nodded, a watery smile breaking through her tears. "Together? Always together." They left the lawyer's office hand in hand, walking out into a world that looked exactly the same but felt completely different. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and somewhere across town, a little boy with his mother's eyes was waiting for them to come home. And home was exactly where they were going. 3 weeks after reading Victoria Ward's letter, Noah found himself standing at Grace's grave for the first time since he'd planted her memorial tree. The official cemetery was different from the park. Quieter, more solemn, with rows of polished headstones stretching toward the horizon like silent sentinels. He'd avoided this place for 3 years, preferring the living warmth of the maple tree to the cold finality of carved granite. But today felt different. Today, he needed to be here. Oliver walked beside him, clutching Mr. Buttons in one hand and a small bouquet of wildflowers in the other. The boy had picked them himself that morning, insisting that Mommy would want the purple ones because purple was the color of magic. "Is this where Mommy sleeps?" Oliver asked as they approached the grave. "This is where we put her body," Noah said carefully. "But remember what we talked about? Mommy's spirit, the part that made her Mommy, that's not here. That's everywhere. In the wind and the sunshine, and especially in your heart." Oliver nodded solemnly. "And in heaven. And in heaven." They reached the headstone and Noah felt his throat tighten. He'd chosen the inscription himself in those dark days after the funeral when every decision felt impossible. The words were simple, almost inadequate, but they were all he'd been able to manage at the time. Grace Ramsey, beloved wife and mother. She chose love. He hadn't known back then how true those words really were. He hadn't known that Grace had chosen love over wealth, over family, over everything she'd been raised to value. He hadn't known that her choice had been the bravest thing anyone had ever done for him. "Can I put the flowers down?" Oliver asked. "Of course, buddy." Oliver knelt beside the headstone and carefully arranged the wildflowers against the granite. His small face was serious, concentrated, as if this were the most important task in the world. "Hi, Mommy," he said softly. "I brought you flowers. Daddy says you can't see them, but I think you can. I think you can see everything from heaven." Noah's eyes burned with tears he refused to shed. Not yet. Not in front of Oliver. "I have some news," Oliver continued, his voice bright and matter-of-fact. "Aunt Celeste is going to be my new mommy. Not instead of you. Daddy said you'll always be my first mommy and nobody can ever replace you. But Aunt Celeste is going to be my second mommy, and she's going to live with us and take care of me and love me forever." Noah hadn't known Oliver understood that much. They'd been so careful about explaining the changes, using simple words and gentle reassurances, but children always understood more than adults gave them credit for. "Daddy loves her," Oliver said. "I can tell because he smiles different when she's around. Not his sad smile or his tired smile. His real smile, the one that goes all the way to his eyes. You used to make him smile like that, Mommy. I remember." A sound escaped Noah's throat, something between a laugh and a sob. He knelt beside his son, placing a hand on the boy's small shoulder. "You remember that?" "I remember everything about Mommy." Oliver looked up at him with those dark eyes, Grace's eyes, and smiled. "I remember her singing in the kitchen even though she couldn't sing good. I remember her reading me stories with all the funny voices. I remember how she smelled like flowers and how her hugs felt like being wrapped in sunshine." "That's beautiful, buddy." "Aunt Celeste smells different, like the ocean. And her hugs feel different too, like being wrapped in a soft blanket." Oliver considered this carefully. "I think that's okay. Different isn't bad. Different is just different." "When did you get so wise?" "I told you, Daddy, I think about things." They knelt together in silence, father and son, surrounded by the peaceful stillness of the cemetery. The morning sun was warm on their backs, and somewhere nearby a bird was singing. "Mommy," Oliver said finally, "I'm going to be happy now. Really happy. And I hope that's okay with you. I hope you're happy too, up in heaven, watching us. And I hope—" His voice wavered, and for the first time Noah saw tears in his son's eyes. "I hope you know I still love you, even though I love Aunt Celeste too. Is that okay? Can you love two mommies at the same time?" Noah pulled his son into his arms, holding him tight, feeling the small body shake with the weight of emotions too big for a 6-year-old to carry. "You can love as many people as your heart can hold," Noah whispered. "And your heart is very, very big. Mommy would be proud of you. She would be so proud." They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other beside Grace's grave, letting the tears come and go like waves on a shore. And when they finally stood up, when they finally turned to leave, Noah felt something he hadn't expected. He felt peace, not the absence of grief that would never fully go away, but the presence of something larger, something that encompassed the grief and transformed it into something bearable, something almost beautiful. "Daddy?" Oliver tugged at his hand as they walked back through the cemetery. "Yeah, buddy. Can we come back here sometimes to visit Mommy?" "Anytime you want." "And can we bring Aunt Celeste?" Noah smiled, a real smile, the kind that went all the way to his eyes. "I think Mommy would like that very much." They found Celeste waiting for them at the cemetery entrance, leaning against her car, her face anxious with worry. She'd offered to come with them, but Noah had felt this moment needed to be just him and Oliver, a private goodbye before the new beginning. But now the goodbye was over, and the beginning was here. "How did it go?" Celeste asked as they approached. "Good," Noah said. "Really good." "Aunt Celeste!" Shh. Oliver ran to her and threw his arms around her waist. "I told Mommy about you. I told her you're going to be my second mommy, and that Daddy loves you, and that you smell like the ocean." Celeste looked at Noah over Oliver's head, her eyes glistening. "You told her all that?" "He's very thorough," Noah said. "I also told her that different isn't bad," Oliver continued, pulling back to look up at Celeste. "Different is just different, and you're different from Mommy, but that's okay. I love you anyway." Celeste knelt down so she was eye level with the boy, her hands on his shoulders, her face soft with an emotion that Noah recognized intimately. "I love you too, Oliver. So much. And I want you to know something important." She took a deep breath. "I'm not trying to replace your Mommy. Nobody could ever replace her. But I promise to love you and take care of you and be there for you always. Can you accept that?" Oliver nodded solemnly. "Can you make pancakes?" "Not as well as your daddy." "That's okay. Daddy's pancakes are burnt anyway." Celeste laughed, and the sound was like music, like bells, like everything good in the world condensed into a single moment. "Then we'll figure it out together," she said. "All three of us." "All three of us," Oliver agreed. They drove home together, Oliver chattering from the back seat about everything and nothing, the weight of the morning already lifting from his young shoulders. Noah reached across the console and took Celeste's hand, intertwining their fingers, feeling the warmth of her skin against his. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For being patient, for waiting, for understanding that this was something we needed to do." "I would wait forever for you, Noah Ramsey." She squeezed his hand. "Haven't you figured that out by now?" The weeks that followed were filled with practical matters and emotional milestones. They sold Noah's cramped apartment and moved into the Ward estate, though they converted it from a museum of old money into something warmer, more lived in. Oliver's artwork covered the refrigerator in the kitchen. Toys were scattered across floors that had once been pristine. Laughter echoed through hallways that had known only silence for too long. Celeste stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the Ward business empire, delegating to trusted managers so she could focus on her new family. Noah quit his job at Henderson's Florals and, with Celeste's encouragement, finally started writing again. The novel he'd abandoned years ago began to take shape, transformed by everything he'd experienced into something deeper and more true. Oliver thrived. He made new friends, started at a better school, and discovered a passion for painting that delighted Celeste to no end. She set up a studio for him in one of the spare rooms, filling it with canvases and paints and every art supply a child could dream of. When Noah asked if she was spoiling him, she just smiled and said she was making up for lost time. And through it all, Grace was never forgotten. Her photograph hung in the living room, not hidden away but proudly displayed. Her journal sat on Noah's nightstand, read and reread until the pages were soft with handling. Her tree in the park grew stronger each year, its branches spreading wider, its leaves providing shade for families who picnicked beneath it without knowing its significance. They talked about her often, the three of them, gathered around the dinner table or curled up on the couch for movie night. Celeste would share stories from their childhood, memories that Noah had never heard, pieces of Lydia that helped him understand Grace more fully. Oliver would ask questions with the endless curiosity of childhood, building a picture of his mother that was richer and more complete than any photograph could capture. It wasn't always easy. There were hard days, days when the grief came rushing back with unexpected force. There were arguments and misunderstandings, and moments when the weight of their unusual situation threatened to overwhelm them. But they faced each challenge together, and together they always found their way through. On the first anniversary of the day Noah had walked into the Ward mansion and seen his wife's portrait on the wall, they held a small ceremony at Grace's grave, just the three of them, standing in the morning light, remembering the woman who had brought them together even in death. "I never thought I'd say this," Noah said, looking at the headstone, "but I'm grateful. Grateful for the lies that led me here. Grateful for the secrets that eventually brought us together. Grateful for every twist of fate that put us in each other's paths." Celeste slipped her hand into his. She would be so happy, seeing us like this. Knowing that her son is loved and safe and surrounded by family. "She is happy," Oliver said with the certainty of childhood faith. "I can feel it, can't you?" And standing there, in that quiet cemetery, with the sun warm on their faces and the wind rustling through the trees, Noah realized that he could. He could feel her, not as a ghost or a memory, but as a presence, a warmth, a love that transcended death and reached across the void to embrace them all. "Yeah, buddy," Noah said, his voice thick with emotion. "I can feel it too." They left the cemetery hand in hand, the three of them walking together into a future that was uncertain but full of promise. Behind them, Grace's headstone stood sentinel, its inscription catching the light. She chose love, and in choosing love, she had given them everything. The years that followed were kind to them. Oliver grew from a precocious 6-year-old into a thoughtful teenager, then a young man with his mother's artistic talent and his father's steady heart. He painted constantly, filling canvases with color and light and emotion, his work eventually hanging in galleries where critics used words like luminous and transcendent. Noah finished his novel, then wrote another, then another. His books were never bestsellers, but they found their audience, readers who appreciated quiet stories about ordinary people navigating extraordinary circumstances. He dedicated every book to the same two people. For Grace, who taught me to love, and for Celeste, who taught me to love again. Celeste transformed the Ward Foundation from a tax shelter into a genuine force for good, funding scholarships for students escaping difficult family situations and supporting organizations that helped people start over. She said it was her way of honoring her sister's legacy, of turning the Ward fortune into something Lydia would have been proud of. They married on a spring afternoon, 5 years after that first fateful delivery, in a small ceremony at the estate. Oliver served as best man and ring bearer and gave a speech that made everyone cry. The reception was held in the garden where Lydia had planted flowers as a teenager, where Grace had dreamed of freedom, where a family had finally been made whole. And every year, on the anniversary of Grace's death, they returned to her grave. Sometimes just Noah, sometimes all three of them. Sometimes with flowers, and sometimes with stories, and sometimes with nothing but silence and memory. On what would have been Grace's 50th birthday, they made the trip together for the last time as a trio. Oliver was 23 now, about to leave for Paris on an art fellowship, about to begin his own adventure in the wider world. "I'm going to miss this," Oliver said, kneeling beside the headstone. "Coming here with you guys, talking to her." "You can talk to her anywhere," Noah reminded him. "She's not just here." "I know, but it feels different here. More real." Celeste knelt beside him, placing fresh flowers against the granite. "She would be so proud of you, the man you've become, the artist you're becoming." "Do you think she knows? Do you think she can see?" It was a question Oliver had asked many times over the years, and the answer had evolved as he grew. As a child, Noah had offered comfort and certainty. As a teenager, he'd offered philosophy and possibility. Now, speaking to a young man about to step into adulthood, he offered truth. "I don't know," Noah admitted. "Nobody knows what happens after we die. But I choose to believe that love doesn't end, that the people we lose stay connected to us somehow in ways we can't see or measure. And your mother loved you more than anything in the world. If there's any way for her to watch over you, she's doing it." Oliver nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'm going to make her proud. I promise." "You already have," Celeste said, "every single day." They stood together in the cemetery, three people bound by love and loss and the strange alchemy of fate. The sun was warm, the sky was clear, and somewhere in the distance, a bird was singing. "I love you guys," Oliver said suddenly, pulling them both into a fierce hug. "I know I don't say it enough, but I do, so much." "We love you too," Noah managed, his voice rough. "Always have, always will." "That's what family is," Celeste added. "Love that doesn't end. Love that just keeps growing, no matter what." They held each other for a long moment, letting the warmth of connection wash over them. And when they finally pulled apart, when they finally turned to leave, Noah cast one last look at Grace's headstone. She chose love. He smiled, feeling the truth of those words settle into his bones. She had chosen love, and in doing so, she had given them all the greatest gift imaginable. Not wealth or status or the Ward legacy, but something far more precious. A family. A future. A reason to believe that even the deepest grief could eventually transform into something beautiful. "Ready?" Celeste asked, slipping her hand into his. Noah looked at his wife, at his son, at the life they had built together from the ruins of heartbreak and secrets, an impossible coincidence. "Yeah," he said, "I'm ready." They walked out of the cemetery together, leaving the past behind but carrying it with them always. The sun was bright, the day was warm, and somewhere ahead, the future was waiting. And it looked a lot like home.